Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mack Worley III.
Hello, MacPack. It's great to be back with you for another exciting episode of On the Move with Mack Worley. I, of course, am your host, Mack Worley III, and I'm really excited to be here with you today. We got a really big show. It's a really big show in store for you today. I hope you are, first of all, willing to join us on the conversation. I'd rather have a dialogue than a monologue. I so much enjoy talking with you guys and hearing different opinions, different viewpoints, and that's why I do the show, to get my philosophy out there, the things that I support and advocate for, but also so I can communicate with you guys and have a back and forth, and that is why I like to do this. Is my favorite part of the show, is talking with you guys. So please feel free to give us a call. The number of the show is 360-450-5625. Again, that's 360-450-5625. You can also get us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. Send us a message. I'll read your message on the air if it's deemed worthy. And also on Twitter @OnTheMoveShow. So please do not hesitate to get in contact with us. Today's show is titled President Trump, Civil Unrest, and Division. This is episode 141 of On the Move with Mack Worley. And today's featured topics, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things. I got the show pretty action-packed today. The first topic I want to talk about is why and how Trump won the election. Also, I want to report about some suicide hotlines that experienced massive upticks in call flow after the election. I want to talk about a specific event relating to electioneering laws. You may be familiar with that. It's basically an anti-free speech zone around the election booth. So around the voting booth within a certain distance. So we're going to talk about one situation that came up as a result of that. I also want to talk about the left's attack now on the Electoral College, the system itself, and secession movements that are surging in the aftermath of the Trump victory. And I want to actually ask the question, and we'll do the research here on the air, is Islamophobia actually on the rise? So is there attacks against Muslims? Because, again, one of the main things that I am wanting to do right now is to reach out and connect the dots with these disenfranchised Hillary Clinton voters, these people who absolutely loathe Donald Trump. You know, the ones that are literally getting tattoos on them that say Donald Trump is not my effing president. I just saw this just a minute ago. Somebody got this tattooed on their side. Crazy world that we're living in. So, again, it's on your body forever. So, but some of the things that they're saying, I want to listen and actually find out. Is this stuff happening? Because I know I'm not doing it. I'm not out there beating up Muslims. You know, I'm not out there threatening people. I'm not doing this stuff. So maybe I'm in a bubble. So let's do the research. Let's talk to each other and find out what the claims that the other side is actually making. There is some merit to this, to know what claims they're making, number one, and to know which ones of those claims are true and which ones are false. So that's what we're going to be doing throughout the show. Lots of other stuff on the agenda. In fact, we're about to be joined by my good friend Mark Delphine in a moment. And in the second hour, we're going to be joined by a Libertarian. I haven't had a chance to get to know this gentleman yet, but I saw him on Facebook. I connected with him, asked him if he wanted to join us on the show. I'm trying to make some more friends here. So his name is Alex Merst, and I believe he was running for a Senate seat, if I'm not mistaken. Let me go over to his profile if I can find it. But he's a Libertarian, and he is. I think he was some kind of candidate. I didn't have this up already here. It's loading. Facebook is slow. I apologize. Okay, he was running for the U.S. Senate from New York. So this is his backer on his Facebook banner. It says, the pro-U candidate, pro-peace, pro-criminal justice reform, pro-fiscal responsibility, pro-tolerance, pro-property rights, pro-bill of rights, pro-privacy, pro-immigration, pro-trade, pro-sound money. So it does. I mean, we're probably not going to agree on everything, but we're going to have a really good conversation. That's going to be at the beginning of the second hour. I'm really excited for that. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and bring on my good friend. His name is Mark, Mr. Mark Delphine, or as he refers to himself, the Unstoppable Delphine. Hey, Mark, are you there?
I sure am. How are you?
I am doing as well as can be expected in the aftermath of this election. The better question is, how are you, Mark? How are you doing?
I'm embarrassed and I'm ashamed of my country.
Okay,
that's about what I can say. I'm going through the stages of grief right now. So it's right now I'm finally starting to get into the acceptance stage, but it's been It's been an historic year, to say the least, and it was all capped off by something like this. So, yeah, it's kind of a gut check, let me tell you.
Okay, so you said that you're embarrassed of your country. So, why?
Embarrassed for it.
What are you embarrassed about in particular?
The fact that we would elect this man. The fact that 60 million people thought that this man was the choice to run the country.
So I think you and I have differences of opinion on Trump insofar as I don't think Donald Trump himself is racist. I don't think Donald Trump himself is Hitler. I think only Hitler was Hitler. I think Donald Trump has the potential to be, a very strict authoritarian. He's promised to be the crackdown candidate as far as the police and being the law and order candidate. This kind of stuff, this kind of rhetoric concerns me. I'm concerned about how he can use this to strengthen the police state and things like that. But I'm willing to give him a try. I don't think that he himself is racist, whereas I think you do. Am I wrong?
Sure. I think, I don't look at him and his motives for saying the things that he has said that were racist were so much so that, I don't know, I think he's it depends on what you look at as racist. But I think the guy speaks to the ideas of a constituency, and he says the things that he knows can really kind of rally people. He's a rabble-rouser, so does that mean that he is a racist? Well, if he's, bringing a bunch of racists with him, being a leader of racists, how can you be a leader without actually being one yourself? I don't know.
So, I mean, I don't know. I've heard rumors, and I'm not here to speculate and judge somebody based upon a rumor from someone else, especially Donald Trump being, a pretty famous person. You're going to have people who are just lying to be famous from time to time. So I don't know what's true and what's not. I've heard rumors, and don't take this as a gospel, folks, because I don't know if this is accurate. But I've heard that employees who were black had to leave his casino floor when he came up there. That's what I heard somebody say that happened. I don't know if that's true. It very well could be a complete and total lie. I've also heard that Donald Trump has said to someone, and that someone has related to the media, that Donald Trump doesn't like black people to count as money. I don't know if that's accurate. So if that is, then yeah, that's a problem. My biggest thing that I want to do right now is to communicate with these disenfranchised leftists, similar to yourself, because I think you probably feel a lot of the same feelings that most of the left is feeling right now. Would you agree with that? You probably feel a lot of what like Hillary Clinton supporters are feeling right now, Mark, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what most Americans feel. I mean, only 60 million of this country voted for him, which is a lot, 59 million, whatever, give or take. Less than what Hillary got, but we live in an electoral college. But that being said, I think I'm stunned. I mean, like I said, I'm embarrassed, and I find that to be a disgrace because it's kind of, what I call this election is a repudiation on civility. It wasn't his ideas so much that I was against, even though I'm a free trade guy. And it wasn't even so much as what, the type of business that he did, because, he was kind of a con artist. It was just the type of person that he is and the lack of civility that he ran with. And the president is not just somebody that makes a lot of decisions for the country and on behalf of the country, but he's somebody that represents the country. And that lack of civility and how he just thundered away and just in the most immature ways about anybody that just disagreed with him or that criticized him. And you're going to get a lot of criticism when you're the president, But before Mack, and here's the major difference, and when you brought up Hitler or whatever, it's like Hitler wasn't Hitler until he got power. But if we were able to see somebody from the past behave the way that Trump has, I don't think anybody would ever look at that and say that's worthy or appropriate for being the president of the United States. And people are like, well, screw political correctness. But come on. There's a boundary that was clearly crossed a long time ago when he's attacking Carly Fiorina, his political opponent. She's not fit to be president because she's ugly. I mean, these are the kinds of, attacking John McCain for, getting caught as a POW. Attacking a Gold Star family because of the fact that the woman he didn't think would be able to talk, and then he juxtaposed them with, extreme Muslim terrorists.
So let me ask you, and I want to cut to some of the core things that I'm hearing on the left that their major concerns are about Trump. First of all, I honestly don't think Donald Trump is going to do much when it comes to a massive deportation force. I honestly don't believe that he's going to build that wall. That's my opinion. But what I'm hearing a lot of concerns from the left is that they're concerned that Donald Trump is going to start building a police state even bigger, kicking in doors and hauling illegal immigrants away. They're concerned about, gay rights. I'm sure that's something that you're concerned about, Mark, being that you're a homosexual man, correct?
Yeah, if you look at it, it's actually less about Trump on that one than it is about Pence and what Pence represents. And Pence, not only the RFRA, which I think we both agreed, if it were all just a blank slate, religious freedom or freedom to do whatever you want to is one thing. But in this respect, well, maybe not, but all I'm saying is that he's the father of the Religious Freedom Referendum Act, right?
Explain to our listeners what that is, just so that they're on the same page here.
In other words, only one particular group can be discriminated against, but for religious purposes, anybody can discriminate against gays based on their religious grounds. Now, let me caveat on that, and I'll let you continue. Give me 1 second. I just want to point out the RFRA gives somebody who has a religious objection from the ability to reject services such as baking a cake for a homosexual wedding or something like that. Do you disagree with that summation of that, what that law is? No, I don't disagree with what your summation of it is.
Okay, so
for religious purposes, you can discriminate on the basis of homosexuals as far as weddings, things like that. Which, again, I think you and I both said, on principle, we disagreed with that. Like, you should be able to discriminate on religious basis or on whatever basis.
I think it should be, anyone should be able to discriminate for any reason whatsoever, and the free market should bear that out. As we see things go viral very easy. People get fired because they make the wrong tweet. They post something that was unpolitically correct, and it goes out and gets viral, and then that person gets a lot of heat from it. There's no need for the federal government or any government, in my opinion, to come in and use force and tell you that you have to do something against your will. That's my opinion.
Right. No, and I agree with you on that. But on every case, if it's done like that, then yes. Where I think you and I might disagree with is that if you cannot discriminate on the basis of race or gender or religion or national origin or creed, then you also should not be able to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation.
Do you think Donald Trump's going to ban Muslims?
I hope not. I don't think he will, but he does have the unilateral ability to do so, from what I've heard. In addition to that, it's almost irrelevant. It's the mere fact that a political candidate who is now the president-elect had campaigned on that.
Well, his campaign promises. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's a disgrace, though. That is not what this country stands for. Religious freedom.
Exactly.
And you should be. That's a disgrace, and that's what I'm saying is that that is something that really riled people to get him to vote for him. That's what they really liked in this.
Let's talk about that for a second, because it's been narrowed and kind of walked back, and Donald Trump was talking off the cuff. So there's two schools of thought when it comes to Donald Trump. You can either take him literally or not take him literally. You and I, we have taken him literally during the primary. We've taken him literally during the campaign, and Donald Trump supporters, based on just my many conversations with them, I don't believe that they've taken him literally. They hear him say something off the cuff, and they think, oh, it's just him off the cuff, and then he gets it refined. Maybe somebody says in the campaign, this is what he meant. But just so you know, the outright ban of Muslims coming into America has been walked back to something that I believe in, and I think is actually a justifiable policy. I think we've agreed on this before in the past. You agree, and this is Donald Trump's policy, by the way. Do you agree with this? Having using immigration, first of all, as a way to basically get the best and the brightest out there and bring them to the country. We do it as like a job interview process. We get people into the country that we need those jobs. So if that person's an engineer and we need engineers, we bring them in. If we got too many doctors and that guy's a doctor, no, sorry, we don't need any more doctors. You'll be taking an American job. We need people in this career field or something like that. And what Donald Trump is saying in regards to the Muslim populations, he's not saying a ban of Muslims. He's saying stricter processes, more vetting from places that are coming from areas historically known to harbor terrorists like Saudi Arabia, like Iran, like Iraq, like these areas. I think it's a common sense procedure. And again, I don't want to be just throwing around common sense. If you guys have listened to the show for a while, you know that I don't like the term common sense, because they're saying common sense gun measure, common sense this, common sense that. But if you have some area of the country that has a cluster or a denser population of Islamic terrorists, doesn't it make sense to vet them and make sure that we actually, first of all, are not bringing in somebody who wants to kill us, and second of all, they're also going to benefit our society by bringing in a skill or a job or something like that. Do you agree with any of that, or do you disagree?
Okay, well, one is, I'm wondering, are you projecting on Trump? Are you saying that he actually is saying this or believing this, or is this your belief? Because I agree with that. His
vetting. This is what Trump has said after it's been narrowed, and this is on his website. Is the stricter vetting process for areas that are known to harbor terrorists? That's his policy. So what he has said on the campaign trail, I don't take him not literally like his supporters do. I have taken him at his word. I think Donald Trump is more along the lines of FDR, historically speaking. If we're going to give a parallel of that, kind of like FDR. In fact, he's praised FDR. He said FDR was a good president, and this was around the same time as him talking about the Muslim ban, and kind of got him in trouble because FDR is the one that created the concentration camps for the Japanese, and again, I've taken him literally. I look at him like this. Now, to back up for a second, I'm giving Donald Trump a fair shot, folks. I'm not going to say Donald Trump is not my president. First of all, I understand how the elections work. I went into this, and you mentioned that you were going through the stages of grief now. I went through the stages of grief after the primary. When Donald Trump got the nomination, I knew that no matter who got elected, I was going to be disappointed, because I believe that both of them are statist Marxists. So I believe either one. It's just a difference of what they're trying to accomplish. Donald Trump's trying to go more nationalist, and Hillary Clinton was trying to continue along the globalist path of interconnected economies and dependency on other nations and continued dependency on foreign oil and the petrodollar and all of this and all that stuff that I've talked about before. But my concern now is to try to find a way to unify. First of all, I acknowledge Donald Trump as a president-elect. He's going to be the president of the United States no matter what I say or do. I'm willing to give him a shot, but what I want to make known to my leftist friends out there is that if Donald Trump does start putting Muslims in concentration camps, if Donald Trump does start coming after gays and restricting their natural rights, if Donald Trump starts giving not even just illegal immigrants, but actual legal immigrants, starts rounding them up and things like that, if this becomes a white nationalist style White House and administration, you better believe, Mark, that I'm going to be the first person out there locking arms with you opposing it. So I take Donald Trump literally. Right now, I'm a prepare for the worst, hope for the best kind of situation. Whereas I think many people on the left are, they're talking about impeachment, and there's nothing that they can do right now with impeachment. Impeachment requires a law that he can break. Donald Trump hasn't even been in the White House yet. So I don't see how this is helpful, and I think it's only going to continue to divide. Now, as far as Donald Trump on the Muslim ban, do you disagree with that policy of just giving extra vetting for people coming from these regions that harbor terrorists?
Absolutely not. And I'm also in opposition to what Clinton was wanting as far as refugees. I mean, I'm definitely for scrutinizing that, and for, I'm not against the whole refugee thing, and I'm also not against a profiling when it comes to immigration, or even just the people that are coming into this country.
Explain.
I'm not against something. profiling, if you're looking at it coming, from people from a particular country, people from a particular area of the world, people who look or, fit a particular description of people that they are looking for. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are profiling. If you look at it and say anybody who has dark skin with a longer beard and is coming from, actually anybody that's coming from an area I think is okay. You're just saying anybody who looks like this, maybe not. I don't know why I'm digressing so much on this sort of thing, is that the Muslim ban, the reason why I think so many liberals, as well as libertarians, as well as people who really just have, what I would call a sense of common decency, and I'm not talking socialism here, I'm talking just being diplomatic, are embarrassed and are just in shock because of how divisive this man is, how little this man cares about it. So when he said full and total ban, and he was using this from a script, it wasn't like he was just shooting off the hip. I remember him looking at it and going, I propose a total and complete ban of all Muslims coming into this country. And when you start your campaign off like that, after you've won the primary, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he was pretty much the nominee, and he's saying this stuff. You're like, that is so divisive. That's not being the United States president. That's being just Christians president, or anybody who doesn't like Muslims. And then when you're talking about Mexican immigrants, talking about how, they just mooch off the system, they're violent, they're rapists. I mean, you've got to start to think to yourself that you have to have a little bit more class, a little bit more diplomacy, because you're representing the country to the world. And so even if he scaled back and said, I guess people say that's bad, so I'm going to go ahead and lower my standards, or, scale it back as far as just, discriminated against, a particular area, some people will go, he's just not very polished, Mac. I mean, that's just, the way that somebody who isn't a very polished person is. That's irrelevant, really. It's the type of person that you are. And when you've seen this in pop culture over the past 30 years, you know who Donald Trump is. We all do. And we know him to be a lying, conniving, man who's all about himself, I honestly thought this was a joke. I thought this was just an ego stroke that he was going to ride as far as he could get it, and now he's riding it into the White House.
So,
and a man, just real quick, just to finish this, and a man who represents everything, in my opinion, that is bad with this country, lying and cheating and being just so egotistical and arrogant and sexist and racist and, ignorant of all different cultures, and anybody who criticizes you want to attack and attack and attack. And we gave this man not only the keys to the White House, but now instead of just Twitter in his arsenal, he has nuclear weapons and drones, and he's in charge of that. And to expect that this man would behave better now that he has an extreme amount of power, that's the reason why people aren't giving it a fair chance. That's the reason why they're so scared. That it's like, this man is not only the biggest threat to our civil liberties, he's the biggest mistake this country's made. And whether or not his policies work is almost irrelevant. It's the fact that this country had a repudiation on civility and brought something like that into the White House when it has always been a position of civility and of diplomacy. And, presidents have messed up, sure, but none of them have been this disrespectful to other people than this one has.
So, again, and we're talking about all the things that he's done prior to even being president-elect and being in the White House. The way I stand right now, and this is just me, you guys are free to make up your own minds and do whatever you want, but I'm giving Donald Trump a clean slate right now. All the things that he said and done in his civilian life, I'm going to go ahead and wipe clean as far as the way I cast my judgment upon him. The things that he does now, not the things that he said in the past, the things that he's done, his policies, what he's trying to push for, this is going to determine whether or not I think Donald Trump is somebody I need to oppose or somebody I need to support. And if he's doing things like he has said, and I highly doubt this is going to happen, but if it does, I tell you, I'll be backing Donald Trump on these efforts, is to impose term limits on Congress. If he does that, I will support it. Now, if he tries to pass restrictions upon due process in the Second Amendment, like when he was talking about anybody who's added to the no-fly list, you'll be denied your Second Amendment right, this is concerning to me, and I will oppose that. Just like if he tries to come after people and he's using the police state to crack down on protests that are not riots, and there is a major difference when public property is being destroyed, when private property is being destroyed, when people are being beaten up. Those are not called protests. Those are called riots. And we're going to get into that in a little bit. But you mentioned this was a repudiation on civility. And let me ask you, one of the things that I'm hearing from the left is that they are so disappointed with the rest of the country and anyone who voted for Donald Trump. I'm hearing many people say, I had no idea that the rest of the country was racist like this. Was this racist? Was this bigoted? And I feel disenfranchised from the rest of the country. And I'm curious about you, Mark. Do you think that Donald Trump supporters are racist?
Not all. No. I don't think all of them are.
Okay.
Would I say the majority? Yes.
The majority of Donald Trump supporters you believe are racist?
I do.
Okay. Well, this is where you and I are going to disagree. So I'm noticing here, and in fact, let me go ahead and search this here. Because
it depends on what you consider to be racist, though.
What do you mean?
How do you define racism?
Treating people, discriminated against people because of their skin color, ethnic background, that kind of thing.
No, when you're saying discriminating against, what do you mean by that?
Let's just go with the simple: you treat people differently based upon their skin color or their religious background. Doesn't matter if it's positively different or negatively different. That's you're treating people different based upon those factors.
Yeah. Okay. And okay. I wouldn't disagree with that necessarily. And so when you have a candidate who comes out and two of his biggest issues are banning Muslims and building a wall and kicking out illegal immigrants.
But does that make you racist to want to build a wall, want to kick out illegal immigrants? Because, Mark, I'll tell you, I don't want to build the wall, but I do want to kick out illegal immigrants. Am I racist?
Sure. No. But no, I didn't say that at all. And I'm not even talking about you. What I'm saying is that, and I would never compare that with what I'm saying is that when you are running a campaign on this, you're naturally going to bring out people who are in favor of that type of behavior, who are really supporting that kind of thing, banning a religion, especially a religion that you don't like, and banning essentially a group of people coming into this country, and then calling them the things that he was calling them.
The difference is between the literal or the rhetorical. Is he speaking with rhetoric? How do you feel? How do you believe? I think that Donald Trump. Honestly, I think some cases, depending on what he's talking about, he's being literal. Some cases, he's speaking with a lot of rhetoric. I don't know the difference, so I take him literally on everything he's saying.
But you're talking about his supporters, though.
Exactly, but it depends on what his supporters are doing as well. I think some of these supporters, and I think the vast majority of Republicans, because I'm hearing that a lot of historical Republican voters came out more so to vote for Donald Trump than Democrat supporters came out to vote for Hillary Clinton. And by the way, I just want to point out and correct the record here. Because I did make a prediction, and I just want to let everyone know that I was right on this. The votes, the amount of votes that were in this election were not historic. It wasn't a record amount of people when you factor in population increase, which is, I believe we had about 30 million more voters this year than in previous elections. So we now, when we factor in population increase, Donald Trump did not have a massive amount of people that came out. In fact, this was actually a pretty lackluster election cycle, and especially lackluster because even though historical Republicans, most of them came out, the Never-Trumpers didn't really have as big of an impact as we may have thought we would, but more historical Republicans came out to support their party than did in the Democrat Party. What happened is there was a repudiation of Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton did not get the black voters to come out. As I don't know if you guys are familiar, but President Obama said he would be insulted if the black community didn't come out and vote for Hillary Clinton. Do you remember that? Did you hear that, Mark?
I don't know if it was just the black community. I think he just was saying that he would be insulted if people didn't come out who came out for him the last time, which I think he was insinuating a lot of the black community. But
let's go ahead.
I don't know that he just said blacks.
I have a clip here. I'll go ahead and play it real fast. We'll get it right from his mouth. Let's see what he has to say.
Saying their vote does not matter. That it doesn't matter who we elect. Read up on your history. It matters. We've got to get people to vote. In fact, if you want to give Michelle and me a good send-off, and that was a beautiful video, but don't just watch us walk off into the sunset now. Get people registered to vote. If you care about our legacy, realize everything we stand for is at stake. All the progress we've made is at stake in this election. My name may not be on the ballot, but our progress is on the ballot. Tolerance is on the ballot. Democracy is on the ballot. Justice is on the ballot. Good schools are on the ballot. Ending mass incarceration, that's on the ballot right now. And there is one candidate who will advance those things. And there is another candidate whose defining principle, the central theme of his candidacy, is opposition to all that we've done. There's no such thing as a vote that doesn't matter. It all matters. And after we have achieved historic turnout in 2008 and 2012, especially in the African American community, I will consider it a personal insult, an insult to my legacy, if this community lets down its guard and fails to activate itself in this election. You want to give me a good send-off? Go vote!
So what do you think about that, Mark?
Yeah, I agreed with all of it.
So let's look up here and see what happened with the black turnout here. I'm bringing up Google right now. Black voter turnout.
He got a lot more than what I think most people thought he was going to.
Okay. Voter turnout.
A lot more of the black vote. I think he got a lot more of the Hispanic vote, too.
Let's see here. That's other, non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic black. Okay, there we go. Black. Oh, whoa, he's way down. Okay, this is in this election here, 2016. I believe this is 2016. Let me just double check. Yes, it is. Okay. All right. So, black voters in 2012. They came out about 60%, a little bit more than maybe 65%, and in 2008 it was 70%. This year, black turnout was lower than 40%. So African Americans did not come out and vote this year as they had in previous years, and we're back to looks like historic averages, which in the past, since 1984, we're looking somewhere between 38% and before the 2008 election, the highest that they got was 60%. So they had pretty large upticks here, 65 to 70% when Obama was running. So they had about a 5 to 10 percentage points increase. But it looks like they're back down now to historic lows, and this was a very poor election for the African American turnout, and that affected Hillary Clinton. And the Hispanic turnout, by the way, I'm looking at it right now. Green is Hispanic, and that is This was the lowest election turnout for Hispanics as well, apparently, since 2000 and what year was that? Looks like 2004 had the lowest before this, but it's all been pretty low. This is actually, it's seeing a massive drop here by about 5% of the population, and they'd been pretty, Hispanic communities, it look like they've been pretty consistent between the elections. They're hovering right around the same area, but now they've dropped off. So it looks like Hispanic communities didn't come out and surge for Hillary like they were expecting. Neither did African American communities. And Donald Trump had a lackluster night. Honestly, it wasn't like he got a historic amount of voters to come out and vote for him. He just was up against a very weak opponent who everyone didn't trust. People, the words that people used to describe her most often were liar, untrustworthy, dishonest, those kind of things. So when you put a candidate up that people don't trust, don't like, don't want to vote for, but is the appointed, anointed candidate, the next in line, and again, it doesn't seem like the Democrat bench is that deep. This is what happens, and I think a lot of people were fed up. If we're talking about why, I believe that Donald Trump won this election, how he won the election. Well, first of all, the RNC teamed up with him, as evidenced by his acceptance speech with Reince Priebus. He gave him a big handshake and it gave him a lot of credit. Now Reince Priebus is going to be his chief of staff. This was announced today, I believe. So it's clear that the Trump, the Donald, he has cozied up to the Republican establishment, and they're going to be a big part in his campaign. Not only his campaign, they were a big part in that, but also they're going to be a big part in his administration. So, Mark, why do you think Donald Trump won the election?
A lot of what you said is that Hillary wasn't a very trustworthy candidate, or she wasn't a very trusted candidate. She was somebody that also, a lot of times when you have a party in power for 2 consecutive terms, the tide shifts quite a bit. You also had a lot of in my opinion, you had a lot of the reality TV voter, people who really aren't into politics, they really don't care either way, but, there's a guy that, I grew up watching, and this is something that's great. Also, I think, talking about an interesting one, I was listening to something on the radio about how there's a very large growing population in the white supremacist movement, and how they were actually being interviewed as saying, Donald Trump's giving them an outlet, he's giving them a voice, he's, justifying kind of a lot of what it is that their behavior. And so you get a lot of these people, kind of what I would consider the state fair attendees. I would consider them the same kind of thing. It's like, I used to go to the state fair and go, where did all these people come from? It was just like real backwoods, kind of like just, people that I would be like, whoa, these people are just kind of out there. And they just kind of crawl out of the woodwork for the state fair, Same kind of way that I would look at the Trump voter. It's kind of like, I didn't even think that these people were, still motivated by that kind of behavior. But it's just that extremism. I think that's where, and then you had just hardcore Republicans who are like, I don't care who the Republican nominee is, I'm going to go ahead and vote for Donald Trump or the Republican in general. So you had a ton of people who were against Hillary. You had a ton of people who would vote Republican no matter what. And then you had a ton of people that were brought out of the woodwork by this guy because of not one, his extremism, and the other, his celebrity status. I think that's the combination that got him the election.
I think also a lot of Republicans, and why historic Republicans voters have come out to vote for Donald Trump, even though they may not necessarily like him. I think a lot of Republicans came out to vote for him simply because they wanted to oppose Hillary. I do not believe that all Donald Trump supporters are racist. I don't even believe that the majority of Donald Trump supporters are racist. I think that within that base, within that group of people, there's maybe 10% that I would actually call racist. This is a guess. I have no idea. I'm just based on my talking to people who are Donald Trump supporters in my bubble. And again, I can only see what I can see, and I'm reaching out and trying to expand that as far as I can to include the other side. I I just don't believe that this many people are racist. And I think that this was a repudiation of political correctness, yes, but also progressive policies that have been shoved down our throat for 8 years now. And honestly, this is to be expected. Mark, are you familiar with the pendulum theory?
Sure. I mean, how it swings one way versus another, and
exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
So this, I think, is a natural reaction to 8 years of a fundamental transformation of our nation. I mean, this is what Obama promised. He was going to fundamentally transform America, and at the time we were all asking, transform to what? What are you transforming to? I happen to like America. And I think that a lot of people have been fed up. A lot of people are righteously angry, I believe, in the way that the government has worked. Because, again, Congress, the Republican establishment, keeps telling us, during 2008 all the way up to 2016, they kept saying, we have to win Congress before we can fight. We can't do anything until we win Congress. They won Congress, and then they tell us we can't do anything until we win the presidency. And we continue to have these people who are not doing what we elected them to do, which was to oppose these progressive policies. And it seems like they're more concerned about their own political power than doing what we elected them to do. So I think that the pendulum has swung, and as a result, and this is, by the way, this is an analogy that Obama himself has used. Obama says government is like football. Most of the time you're just banging into each other and you're not getting any progress forward, but every now and then you'll see an opening in the field, and if you just run through it, there's no one in front of you to stop you. This is his analogy. And this is what Obama did. They shoved through Obamacare. They've continued to use executive orders and creating a more powerful and imperial presidency. And this is what happens when you start using government power to your own political ends. The pendulum starts to swing. And eventually, when your side loses power, this is what always happens. The other side will grab that swinging pendulum and it will swing further, because now they're doing to you what you did to them. And I don't want, first of all, this pendulum to swing. I want us to use the government power we have now. If you're on the political right, if you believe you're a Republican, if you are siding with Donald Trump, I want us to dismantle this power, take apart the pendulum so it can never be used again. I want us to remove the power that the government has, not to rig the system further on our benefit, and then the next time we lose power, this pendulum swings further next time. And this is how we slide into revolution and dictatorship. This is my concern, because as they're calling this election a revolution, a bloodless revolution. That's what I'm hearing some pundits call this, a revolution. Like Judge Jeanine, I heard her on Fox referring to this as a revolution. The problem is as things become further and further divided and more revolutionized, that every election will become a worse revolution than the last, and I don't want to see that. So this is the swinging pendulum theory. We have to be aware of what we're doing when we're using this government power that our side, I'm using air quotes here, now has. We have to make sure that we're using it in a way that is dismantling anyone's ability to use this power. That's why getting rid of executive orders, if Donald Trump actually does get rid of the Obama executive orders, I would be happy with that. That would reduce some power of the presidency. But if he replaces him with his own, how does that help? That just makes it worse for when we're out of power. Mark, what do you think? That's why I'm saying I'm so deathly afraid of this man. I mean, when you have had, first off, there's so much to touch on when we were talking about that. One, when Bush had a Republican Congress and him as the president, when W did, you had massive amounts of federal spending. You had basically carte blanche. When you're looking at, the extension of the Patriot Act, because the first one was basically thrown under our nose. But you had a major amount of civil rights violations, and on top of that, talk about the 33,000 emails of Clinton. You had an administration that went after federal judges specifically because of their
political ideology. And when he was basically, when somebody was prying into it, when I think it was the Attorney General's office, where I'm not sure, maybe it was the FBI, trying to pry in to figure out what he was doing, 22 million emails were destroyed. So you have when you have two chambers of Congress and an administration that all belong to the same party, it is a really bad thing when it comes to civil liberties and when it comes to fiscal responsibility, because of the fact that they get whatever they want done and passed, and they want to win re-election. So how do you do it? You spend more money. Now, second, this is a man that now has the executive order, and that's what I'm most afraid of. George W. Bush had basically something to lose, really, because he really was an he was an ideological conservative, and he essentially, he had an establishment of Republicans. And Obama had the same thing. When they used executive order, sure, it increased the power of the executive branch substantially. Essentially, and when we're talking executive order, you understand what the power of that is, right? They can pretty much craft whatever law they want or follow the law however they want.
It's not supposed to be like that, but yeah, that's how it's been lately. There's been enough precedent on that they can pretty much do whatever they want, and the courts will fight it later. That's what Obama tried to do with his amnesty efforts through executive order, and he got blocked by the courts, fortunately. So they can't. They don't have carte blanche to do everything, but they do have a lot of power.
So when you're looking at it from W's standpoint and Obama's standpoint, those are two men that I actually trusted as being, reasonably fit for the presidency. Neither of them I liked too much when they first started, but it was the kind of thing where I said, okay, you at least are fit to be president. Now you have a man who is, again, when I'm talking about the biggest threat to civil liberties, this is a man who now realizes that he can pretty much do whatever the hell he wants to do and get away with it. And now that he has two chambers of Congress on his side, he can pretty much do whatever he wants to do. And that's what's so dangerous, because we've seen the type of behavior that this man has shown when it comes to anybody criticizing him talking about how he's going to sue the media for libel. Just imagine what happens when he has executive order behind him.
Yeah.
You want to talk about a freedom of press? No more.
That's something to be concerned about. Again, this is...
Imagine the people who are protesting about him. Imagine what happens when he gets into office. Do you think that there's going to be a freedom of assembly?
So
you can't say what you want about him.
We don't know. We have no idea what he's actually going to do. So again, this is why...
think that he's not going to do this, though, Matt.
Well,
that's what I'm saying.
Again,
is it reasonable to think when he doesn't have the power?
We have to accept, first of all, that this is the President of the United States. This is who we have. And I first of all, and whether or not it was Trump or Hillary, I would do the same thing. I would accept that this is the president, just like I did Obama. Obama was my president. I wasn't happy about it, but he was my president, and he was a Marxist. So again, I think that as we watch Donald Trump, this is my perspective, and you guys can take your own course if you want. But my perspective is we have to, first of all, stop undermining our system of government. Stop trying to, first of all, tell leftists just to shut up as well, because they have a right to feel upset, and many of them aren't used to being on the losing end. First of all, they are now feeling like we felt in 2008 when Obama got elected. They're feeling that.
Mac,
go ahead.
Mac, can I just say this? This is a candidate in Donald Trump and his supporters. His supporters were threatening a riot, a revolution, and that candidate was saying that unless he won, the election was rigged. To basically say, and a substantial number of his supporters were in agreement that if he did not win, then it was rigged. So they don't even believe in the integrity of democracy.
Which is why it's
all
so
they wanted was their man to win.
which is why it's so crucial that we stop undermining it. We've already got the right who believes the system is rigged, and many on the right. I'm not saying every single one. I'm just saying, even though we have irrefutable evidence now that it's not rigged enough to stop an outsider candidate from coming in. Donald Trump is evidence of that. If it was so rigged, he wouldn't have, first of all, got $3 million in free media coverage to prop him up in the primary by the media.
Billion.
I'm sorry, yeah, $3 billion. Did I say million? I apologize. That's a billion with a B. $3 billion. And if he didn't get that, he probably wouldn't have won the primary. Maybe he would have. I don't know. But the media created that monster, and then the media tried to turn on him and come out for Hillary the entire campaign. And again, I think that right now we are at a really critical crossroads, Mark, and this is why our messages have to be about, first of all, listening to each other, unity, and trying to reestablish people's confidence in our system. That, first of all, this is what the system spit out here, guys, and that's a reflection upon us. And this is the swinging pendulum. As it swings farther to the left, once they lose power and it swings right, it's going to go further right than it ever has before. And I argue Donald Trump has represented a further right position, which again is not necessarily conservatism. I do not believe Donald Trump to be a conservative. I believe that he is more of a nationalist, kind of like an autocrat style like Putin, or even like FDR. FDR was very big government. Donald Trump represents big government policies. I believe he's going to increase the police state. I think we're going to see a whole lot more NSA spying and things like that on our citizens. We're going to see a lot of civil rights violations and how they spy on Americans and foreigners. I think we're going to see more entitlements, which we've heard Donald Trump saying he's going to protect things like Social Security and welfare. I think he is more like, to give a historical comparison between our presidents of the past, like FDR, who he has said was a great president. So I don't think that a lot of the concerns that the left has about him being such a staunch conservative and coming after people is going to really be the way they think it is. Although my big concern now is these anti-Donald Trump protests and what will happen when he does become president of the United States. Because I believe Donald Trump will send out the troops to squash any kind of protests that are even remotely violent at all, which I think it may be a good thing, but it could get overzealous, and he might just squash protesting altogether. I don't know. When we see what he does, that's when I'll stop reserving my judgment for that. But I think that he's going to increase a police state. And I think that as these protests, when he gets elected, or when he's actually the president of the United States, I think there's going to be a renewed protest like we're seeing now. And it's going to be up to Donald Trump to decide how he wants to measure his response. I don't think that Donald Trump is the kind of person that will use the restraint necessary in this situation. What do you think?
I don't think that the left is upset with his presidency because of him increasing the federal government. I think that they look at this man as a loose cannon, as do I, as does, I think, most logical thinking people that are not ideologues. I mean, if you were so, in hatred of Hillary Clinton, which I disagreed with her policies, which is why I didn't vote for her, but I don't hate her. I don't think she's a horribly corrupt person. I think she's, I think she's definitely much more socialist than what I want. And I had a candidate that it didn't. But I don't look at the people who were supporting, that are in opposition to Donald Trump, just Hillary supporters, and they're not disliking him for anything but the fact that he's just not fit to be president. This is a man that has zero experience whatsoever in government. And now, I'm not saying that, I want a bunch of bureaucrats running the White House. But you have to, if you're going to be, say, for instance, a project manager, or say you're going to be a manager at, say, Home Depot, or you're going to go to, say, a tech company like Microsoft, and you want to, say, be a manager, you have to have some experience in that. They're not just going to hire you to do that. We just gave the keys to the White House to somebody that has zero experience. And as a matter of fact, everything that he has shown himself to be as a businessman is the antithesis of our values. He's a con man, he's a cheat, he's a liar, he screws people over in order to get what he wants. Every business sale is a zero-sum game for him. He wins, they lose, or vice versa. It's documented like this. People who are witnesses to his type of behavior says he talks like this and he behaves like this. I'm not just making this opinion after just one or two comments. This is after 30 years of us seeing what kind of a businessman he is, and to see what kind of a cheat this man is. And then the man who basically has ripped his way off all the way up to the top is now being given nuclear codes and a full amount of executive power. So are people in opposition to him bloating the federal government or, running up larger deficits because of a tax cut and an increase in government spending? I don't necessarily think that that's what most people's fear is. I think most people's fear is how this man's going to behave when he's finally given power, when we've seen how he's behaved, which is horrible when he doesn't have any power.
So
that's what people are afraid of.
Do you think Donald Trump's acceptance speech where he said, to those of you who opposed me or spoke out against me or something along those lines, I'm paraphrasing, he's basically reaching out to them and he said he's going to need their help and advice. Do you think that this does anything to change your mind about what we can expect, or did this comment surprise you at all? What did you think about his acceptance speech? Did you hear it, by the way?
I did, and I know he didn't write it. It was written by somebody else, and it was obvious because this man is just a disingenuous person that way. He didn't, he's saying what he thinks he, needs to be said because of the fact that it's like everybody says this. W said this when he won that really controversial election in 2000. All right, everybody, now that, I've been the most divisive candidate ever, calling for my political opponents jailing and saying that I'm going to have her jailed when I do get into office, saying the election's rigged. Oh, now that I've actually won it, hey, let's all go back to normal and everybody should rally around me. I mean, I can't think of a more megalomaniac type of, conversation to have to the American people.
Were you surprised by his acceptance speech at all, or did you just not give it any credibility as far as him writing it, and you just didn't think that he you thought maybe he was being disingenuous, or he just
totally 100% disingenuous? This is a man who, like I said, just conned his way into the White House. He is totally unfit. I have never been afraid of a candidate, and I don't vote for either major party. This man is dangerous, and so for him to say all of this stuff is basically just like, hey, forget everything that I've just proven myself to be. I'm going to go ahead and say something that I want people to hear because, I don't want people to hate me. He doesn't like it when people talk bad about him.
So if Donald Trump, let's say in these next 4 years, if Donald Trump reduces the federal budget, reduces the size of government, reduces the federal government's ability to influence your life and gives more power over to the states, and reduces the deficit and, the debt, would you support Donald Trump in the next 4 years?
I would give him credit for what he's done, but if you're just saying if he's done all of these or if all of these got accomplished during his presidency, but again, I'm not necessarily looking at, I looked at Reagan's presidency growing up with him as my president as a boy, which, you kind of look up to your president in a different way at that point, but I looked at Reagan's presidency as really great all the way up until I started realizing what he did with the drug war. And then my opinion of him changed a little bit, quite a bit. Agreed. But that being said, I gave him a lot of credit for what it is that he did. I just don't hold him in as high of regard. So when you're saying support him, will I give him credit? Sure, but does he increase the police state at the same time? Does he start another war? Does he do, there's a lot of other things that I would look at and balance as, criteria for whether or not I would support him.
All right. Well, we got to run this segment. We're running up to the break here, and we got another guest coming on. Mark, I really appreciate you joining us. And also, I want to shout out to the 405media.com also youthrevolt.org. We're networked over there, broadcasting at the same time. Just want to shout out to those guys over there. Check them out. Again, youthrevolt.org and the 405 Media. Mark, thanks so much for joining us. I really do appreciate it. And I'm happy that that I got a chance to talk to you because I've been wanting to get a hold of you in the aftermath of this election.
Yeah, thank you, Mac. I appreciate it. Anytime. Can I just give a shameless real quick plug then?
Yeah, go for it.
So this new startup that I'm working on is with the former Libertarian chair of Washington, and we're doing a Libertarian training academy. And so people who are interested in running as a Libertarian for a smaller government, local and statewide office, so not just going for the pie, but, kind of really wanting to learn to be a better candidate, take a look at libertarianleadership.org. And there's some really good stuff that's coming into the works, and what we've done is been able to really see results. So that's a big thing when it comes to Libertarians. So if you are a Libertarian or if you're Libertarian-leaning and you're interested in becoming a candidate, take a look at that, libertarianleadership.org.
All right. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Libertarianleadership.org. Check it out, guys. And thanks so much for your time, Mark. Really appreciate it. All right, folks, we're going to go to a commercial break. When we come back, we should be on the line, if everything works out, if the stars align, with Alex Merst. I'm really excited to talk to him. He's a Libertarian candidate. He was running out of the state of New York for the U.S. Senate, and he should be calling in any moment. We'll be right back after this break, folks. You don't want to go anywhere.
Have you visited the On the Move with Mack Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bear Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On The Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support. Are you an activist who needs affordable flyers or brochures for passing out literature? Or a political candidate who's looking for business cards, logo designs, yard signs, or vehicle decals? Email me, Latasha Worley, for all your graphic design needs at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com. And don't forget to mention On The Move to get a 10% discount on all graphic design services.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mack Worley III.
And we're 3 minutes into the second hour. I certainly appreciate you all sticking with us through the break. And if you made it this far in the program, I would certainly appreciate it if you would share it out with your friends and family. Tell them, hey, I'm listening to the show. It's called On the Move. It's got this host. His name's Mack Worley. Kind of crazy. This guy's kind of crazy, but I think you'll like him. And share it out. Let people know. We talk about, by the way, on this show, if you're just joining us, we talk about all kinds of things: guns, government, liberty, philosophy, history, activism, emergency preparedness, all sorts of different things on this program. So if you have anything you would like to talk about, please feel free to join us. Give us a call. The number of the show is 360-450-5625. Again, 360-450-5625. You can also, by the way, check us out every Sunday. We broadcast every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at onthemoveshow.com or Spreaker.com/onthemoveshow. Follow us over there. You can like us on Facebook.com/onthemoveshow. Follow us on Twitter at onthemoveshow, and subscribe to us on YouTube.com/onthemoveshow. Now, at this point, we are joined by a special guest. His name is Alex Merst. Am I saying your last name right, Alex? Merst?
Alex Merced.
Merced. Oh, I knew I was going to mess it up, dude. First of all, I slaughter last names. That's like a thing I'm known for. So I apologize. I just knew I was going to mess that up.
It's fine. I got that a lot. So it's all good.
Okay. Alex Merced, you were running for the U.S. Senate out of New York. Is that correct?
That is correct. So this year I got to run against good old Chuck Schumer.
Oh, okay. So give us an update on what happened.
So basically, last Tuesday of the election, as everyone knows, my election was kind of weird. So I ended up getting 44,000 votes, making me the highest, the second highest vote total for U.S. Senate for the Libertarian Party in New York history. Basically, there was one election in 1992 where I think Norma Segal got over 100,000 votes. Now, I probably would have beaten that record, but what happened is that Gary Johnson got nominated by two different parties in New York. So he also got nominated by the Independence Party. So the Independence Party was actually placed at a higher location on the ballot, and they, for U.S. Senate, instead nominated Chuck Schumer as their U.S. Senate candidate. So most people voted for Gary Johnson on the Independence line, and then just voted down the line. So basically, Gary Johnson had like 150,000 votes in New York. Well, I got 44,000. And if you take a look at the actual like county by county voting patterns, basically they all voted on the independence line. So basically, a lot of those Gary Johnson votes ended up going to Chuck Schumer, unfortunately.
Oh wow. Okay. So, what are your thoughts on the way that the national election ended up?
You know what? It shouldn't have been a surprise. Basically, take a look at the polls that were saying that Hillary was going to have this big landslide victory. They were all based on the Obama turnout. They were based on which she wasn't going to have. She was never going to have the Obama turnout. And I always knew that Trump was going to do better than he was polling because he had a very enthusiastic support. The question was how deep that support was, how big that turnout was going to be, and it turned out to be a lot bigger than anyone expected, and Hillary ended up underperforming more than anyone expected. But I think if you take a look at history and take a look at all the previous elections going back the last 10, 20 years, you see that's always whoever the change candidate wins. Going back to, let's start with Al Gore versus George W. Bush. I mean, Al Gore was more the establishment candidate. He represented the existing Washington establishment. He lost. The next election was Kerry versus George W. Bush. Kerry, again, was more of a old, long-time Washington person. And then you go to the next election, Obama versus McCain. So again, McCain's that sort of long-time Washington establishment person. Obama wins, and then Romney. So basically, always is sort of the more changed, the candidate that's sort of more anti-establishment generally wins the election. So it should have been obvious it was going to go the way it was earlier. But again, hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was saying last week I was just shocked when Comey, FBI Director Comey, came out and reopened the Hillary investigation. I said last week, and by the way, I've been saying for this entire election, the general and the primary, that a vote for Donald Trump in the primary was a vote for Hillary Clinton in the general. I just didn't think that he would win. But with the FBI investigation, I just did not imagine a scenario where Trump couldn't win. I mean, his opposition was under FBI investigation, and I couldn't imagine a scenario where that wouldn't matter. What did you think about that?
I mean, I think in hindsight, Trump was always going to win. Basically, what it comes down to, when you take a look at the popularity of Bernie Sanders, you take a look at the popularity of Trump, what you have is sort of this old guard middle class vote, which is a large portion of the country, who basically they don't necessarily feel that. Well, I'm a very pro-trade person, and I'm all for expanding trade with other countries, and I think there's a lot of economic benefits. There's a lot of people who were sort of, whose families were sort of middle class, let's say in the 60s, 70s, who, as globalization has taken place, they haven't necessarily seen, they don't see how their situation has improved as much as others. So basically, the Bernie Sanders supporters were the children of those people, and the Trump supporters were those people who got laid off in those factories that either, now are automated, or they've moved overseas, or employ a lot of, let's say, undocumented labor. So they see those frustrations. And while, again, I have a different view on a lot of those issues, there are people who sort of were on the losing side of those trends, and it turned out to be sort of this very vocal group, and is a much larger group than I think a lot of people expected, because they're generally not the people usually who are in the political conversation.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So let me ask you on trade. This is Donald Trump's big thing. He's talking about putting a 30-something% tariff on goods coming from China, Mexico, Japan. And you said you were a pro-trade person. I'm assuming you mean free market. Is that correct?
I am a radically free market, yes.
Okay. What does that mean, radically free market? Because I am myself, I would consider myself radically free market as well. But where do you stand on that? What does that mean to you?
To me, pretty much anything that any policy that would make the ability for individuals to voluntarily enter any kind of arrangement they want, I'm for. So I'm always for moving in that direction. So I'm for less government imposed regulation. I'm for less taxation. I'm for less barriers between travel of individuals, less barriers to travel of goods and services. I'm just for giving individuals as much control over their ability to deal with others as much as possible, and that reflects that's in trade as well. And all the free market is individuals exchanging with each other freely. So to be radically for individual freedom is to be radically free market.
Do you support the TPP?
I don't. I support free trade. I have become very skeptical of most trade agreements. Basically, the way I like to put it forth is that while you do expand trade between two nations, the way it works out is you basically have the large corporations of one nation negotiating with the large corporations of another nation, an agreement that facilitates trade between the two countries, but in a way that protects the market share of those large corporations from both countries. So that actually hurts the small to medium corporations of both countries, hurts competition, which hurts the consumer. So I'm for more trade between nations. Ideally, and honestly, you don't need to have a trade agreement to do that. The U.S. can just sit there and say, hey, we're going to be a nation that anyone can trade with. Whatever your trade policy is your trade policy, but we're going to sit there and say, here, we're going to have a uniform policy. And basically, I would say no quotas. I do think, while ideal world there'd be no tariffs, no taxes, etc., I think like a small, let's say 10% uniform tariff that's on all imports and exports. So that way it's not favoring one business over the other. Because I'd rather more of the government gets funded through a tariff, like a 10% tariff going in and out, and get rid of the income tax. Because that way, when the incentive for government would then be to expand trade with other nations. Because if they generate their revenue from trading with other nations, they have every incentive to be peaceful with other nations, get along with other nations, and that would actually reduce war, have them more focused on the economy, instead of right now where basically it's all about people's individual income, which incentivizes the government to drive inflation, because that's a much easier way of driving up people's income.
Well, I completely agree with you about abolishing the IRS as far as the income tax. I'm assuming then you're probably in favor of what, a consumption tax or a fair tax in conjunction with what, a constitutional amendment repealing and forbidding any kind of income tax ever being put in place again?
I'm definitely for fixing the Constitution so that way there is no income tax. Not for a consumption tax per se. There's logistical issues, and one, I'd rather not replace the income tax. I'd rather just get rid of the income tax and then
just go straight with the tariffs. That's the only income that the government
that'd be a much lower tariff than we have nowadays. I mean, for things like sugar, you're talking about like 300% tariffs. Mm-hmm. But a small 10% tariff won't discourage trade on either side, but it will generate revenue for the government. And as we expand trade around the world, then the government will be focusing on what it should be focusing on, making sure that people here can deal with business, can deal with people elsewhere, and that things are okay. Basically allow us to be free and work towards that. As far as the income tax goes, though, what I have proposed, because when I was running for U.S. Senate, the thing about getting rid of the income tax is a very large step, and that's maybe sometimes a step too far for many people. So I was trying to think of a way where you can kind of address tax complexity, because tax complexity I think is really kind of hurting business, hurting people's personal investment lives, because people are too scared to do a lot of things because they're scared of the tax ramifications. Same thing with the regulations. People are just too scared of what regulations they may accidentally break by doing anything. So people just don't do anything and don't do anything at all. People who would start a business don't. So in moving in that direction, what I did is I mixed two very libertarian ideas. These aren't libertarian ideals because no tax is an ideal tax. No redistribution of wealth is an ideal distribution of wealth. Those are things that are just sort of, as a libertarian, you always rather not have.
Taxes, theft, that kind of thing. I get what you're saying.
So what I did is I took two ideas that kind of move in that direction, that's the flat tax and then the universal basic income. And I combined them into one proposal, essentially a flat tax that kind of has a basic income built into it. That kind of basically, the idea is you would make the tax code much simpler, but also you'd get rid of Medicare, Social Security, all the different you'd get rid of all the other social safety net and bureaucracy that goes with it because of this sort of basic income that's built into the tax code. And if you look up Alex Merced's 20% flat tax plan, you can see how it works. It's actually, and that's actually helped me get a lot of people on the left to start talking about, open up to the idea of a flat tax. Open up to the idea of a simpler government.
You said universal income. Let me just ask you, what do you mean by a universal income?
Now, basically, the universal basic income as an idea by itself, the idea is that government's really complicated. So you got Medicare, and it has all these rules, and you end up wasting all this money just administering the program. And there's then you throw in Medicaid, Social Security, all these programs have all these administrative costs, and all this sort of corruption that goes within the system. So if you're going to have redistribution of wealth, then at least make it simple where you get rid of that bureaucracy. Don't make government so complicated so it's less corrupt. So the idea is you give everybody sort of a flat dollar amount every year, and there's no other aid. Basically, if you waste the money that's given to you every year, that's your problem.
Wait
you get, let's say,
I just want to make sure I'm keeping up. So you're saying the government gives a certain amount of income every year to the citizens?
Correct. So it's an idea that they're actually contemplating, I think, in somewhere in Scandinavia. So they're actually thinking of getting rid of their entire social safety net, pretty much getting rid of the vast majority of their government and replacing it. All the money that would be spent on that government, replacing it with this universal basic income. Now, the Libertarian, that would just be a step in the right direction. Then the next idea would be to get rid of that basic income. But the idea is that people, like Milton Friedman used to talk about how if you're going to give money, it's better to just give the cash and not have all these strings attached.
Yeah, I remember one of the things that Friedman was talking about is it would actually be cheaper to take pallets full of dollar bills and just shove them out of the back of a moving truck in low-income neighborhoods, and that would create more stimulus. But he warned that would only be effective once, maybe twice at most. But he warned about diminishing returns on that kind of stimulus. So my concern, and I get what you're saying as far as a universal income. I look at this as more of a redistribution of wealth program. I don't think that would be a step in the right direction. Please,
no, it totally is. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Okay, well tell me why that wouldn't expand to become something that's so far entrenched like welfare and even how Obamacare is going to end up being. It's going to be part unless Donald Trump changes things. How would this actually be a step in the right direction? I would look at that as being a step in the wrong one.
Again, I mean. Now, I'll make 2 points. First off, Milton Friedman did make an argument similar to the universal basic income. That was called the negative income tax, which is technically what became the earned income tax credit. But the point of the universal basic income tax, to me, is not so much actually getting it implemented. I do agree with you that if it actually got implemented, I don't know necessarily that I don't trust government enough to not necessarily just keep it that way or keep moving in that direction. But the idea itself, same thing with a flat tax. I don't really want a flat tax. I want no tax. But these ideas help people who are not necessarily as far along the path as I am to start thinking in that path. Because what you're doing is you're giving them enough of where they already are at to look a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole, and then you can pull them deeper. So to me, they're great intellectual tools to get people who are not even near where I'm at to get a little closer down the hole. I've gotten people who are very, very far left progressives starting to actually openly say that maybe government being so complex and having all these complex rules maybe is a bad idea, or maybe a complex tax code and having is a bad idea, and maybe moving in this direction is a little bit better. So to me, it's more of an intellectual tool. I do think theoretically, if you had this government you could actually replace everything with this, would be a step in the right direction. But I agree with you that I don't trust government to do that, and nor would that necessarily be what I don't think of these as ideal world positions, but they are ideas that help sort of isolate one aspect of what libertarians have concerns about government and help people think in that one slice and move in that direction. So that way people can focus on one issue, you change them there, and then you kind of keep moving along and tweaking them here and there.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So, I mean, I get where you're coming from. I just think that kind of program would stick around and it wouldn't go away and it would expand, and more than likely we'd probably get that and keep welfare and keep everything else that we still have.
Oh, totally agree.
We'd probably end up with a more progressive income tax. We'd probably end up with this and that. And for me, this. No offense, we're just talking right now. So, and by the way, Alex, feel free to disagree with me wholeheartedly. You don't have to.
I'll give you my honest answer.
Okay, yeah. I'm just all about like civil discourse and talking out our issues. And on the universal basic income, this is something that I would oppose, only because I think that it makes us we're having to step closer to the left in order to bring them in, when I think that we have like free markets and low taxes, in a fair tax or a consumption tax or a flat tax. I think that is, first of all, better. It's historically worked out better. And I don't think that it can be argued that it's not fair that if somebody is paying 10% of their income and they're a millionaire, and somebody's paying 10% of their income and they're in poverty, both are paying 10%, and that is fair. I argue it couldn't be argued to not be fair if everyone's got some skin in the game. So, when it comes to a universal basic income, that to me is scary. I don't want more statism. I do agree with you, though, in regards to tax simplicity. We have a 70,000-page tax code, and you're absolutely right about these trade deals. I, as well, am skeptical about things like the TPP and even NAFTA, because you are right. They do allow for crony capitalism, where big companies are colluding with other big companies or the government to make their competition have a harder time, give them an easier time, or get some kind of special favor from the government. So these are the things that I'm skeptical about, and I think it would all be a lot simpler if it was a flat tax or a consumption, where it's basically a use tax. When you buy things, a sales tax, everything you buy, you get a tax put on it. Even on tariffs, if you're buying things from overseas, I think that is a good way to fund the government. And I would only support that, though, if there was a constitutional amendment to basically get rid of and make sure that we could never again have an income tax. Because my biggest fear with that would be the government goes off the wall with the sales tax, and then they bring back the income tax, and now we're even more taxed than we were before. What do you think about that?
Oh no, I totally agree with everything you said. Like when I say the universal basic income, I don't actually propose the universal basic income idea. I took bits of the UBI idea and mixed it with a flat tax. So there's actually, again, it's what I'm advocating, namely, is a flat tax. There's just elements of the UBI built into it. People should watch the video I have on YouTube about it, because it's weird, but it's an idea it's been useful far as talking to people who may be more difficult to talk to. I always advocate that I'd rather eliminate the income tax altogether. That's ideal world. I'd rather just eliminate the income tax altogether. I think we're in agreement on pretty much everything you just said. I agree with.
So, moving to another kind of complicated subject here, what do you think about climate change? Is climate changing? Is it changing because of man-made activity? Do we need to do more research on it? What are your thoughts?
I mean, basically, climate is changing. That's kind of hard to deny. Sometimes it's getting colder, sometimes it's getting warmer. But the bottom line is, whether humans contributed to it or not, if you take a look at these studies, the models that they're talking about, these nightmare scenarios, they're not necessarily high probabilities. One, they're not necessarily high probability scenarios. Two, most of the time, a lot of these models, you compare them to models that were done 20 years ago, and their predictions, they were off. I mean, this is kind of what happened with the whole bet with Julian Simon and the overpopulation bomb, where people always assume that the trends of today are the trends of tomorrow. So a lot of these climate models assume certain things about the way biological things around the world are changing and weather patterns around the world are changing, and assume that that's just going to be constant going forward. That's not the way the world works. These trends are constantly changing because there's a million different variables that these models can't model for. And then there's other factors. For example, a lot of the models have undershot, and part of it is because what's happened is, as carbon has increased, more trees have been growing, because they plants live off carbon. So basically, as more carbon has been in the air, more plants have been growing quicker, and there's been much more green growing around the world. I'm not capture the particular world. So because of the more trees that have been growing around the world, the much more plants that have been growing around the world because of the excess carbon, has actually slowed down the increase in carbon in the atmosphere, which wasn't predicted by these trends. So the bottom line is nature is a complex organism like the economy, and trying to think that you can engineer the environment, to me, is just as pretentious as thinking you can engineer the economy. That's why I advocate for free markets, and I feel the same way towards the environment, that you should just allow all the actors in the environment to act freely, because you really don't know what it needs. Like, you don't know what the economy needs. What you need is everybody to be kind of acting on their own values, and someone might figure out something that's better than the next person, but you don't know who that person's going to be. That's why we shouldn't be telling everybody what to do. And when it comes to what to do to be environmentally friendly, I do believe that recycling is a good thing to do, because it's a good thing to do. I mean, you have those resources that can be used to build new things. But, I mean, as far as doing environmentally friendly things, I think you can do a lot more and this goes for every issue, not just the environment. You can do a lot more by advocating to people, having a discussion with people, and explaining to them why they should choose to do things differently. For example, Al Gore was in office as vice president, senator, for so many years and accomplished nothing on this issue. He makes one documentary and millions of people change their behavior. He did a lot more as a private actor than he ever did as a public actor. And that's generally so to me, Al Gore is the best example of how markets work and why government doesn't work when it comes to trying to create social change. Because when you educate people, whether you like his documentary or not, or people think that things that he said were true or untrue, that's not the issue. The point is, he didn't force anyone to change their behavior. He made a case, and people changed their behavior. And that's what free market people are advocating, that basically you don't force people to make a decision, you advocate. And that forces us to have a discussion, and that forces us to keep improving our ideas, and that's how we get to better ideas and better solutions. So when people try to say government needs to force a solution, I'm always against it.
Yeah, me too. So as far as CO2, the entire, by the way, for those of you out there in the audience who aren't necessarily familiar with this conversation, this debate, the entire debate about climate change is that CO2, carbon dioxide, it is a odorless, colorless, tasteless gas, that it being pumped into the atmosphere is causing heat from the sun to essentially be trapped inside the Earth's atmosphere. It bounces off of the surface of the Earth and then bounces back down from the carbon in the atmosphere and gets trapped. This is the theory. Unfortunately, there's no correlation, scientific correlation. They can't tell you how many parts per million you add of CO2 into the atmosphere, how many degrees the Earth's temperature will rise. There's no correlation with that. And you also look at the fact that even though CO2 began to increase exponentially in about 1940, the temperature actually began to decrease in 1940 and continued until about 1975. So this is pretty clear evidence that CO2 is not causing climate change. This is my opinion. I don't think CO2 is the problem in this scenario. I think that we need more research about how the climate works. And I agree with you, Alex. I don't think that the scientists truly understand all the variables that are in play in this. That's why all the computer models that they run on this, they keep saying that the climate's going to end up being this at this year. On this year, it's climate. The temperature should be this or whatever, and then after the model's been run and we have that data and we see what the temperature actually was when they predicted it, and when that date finally comes, it doesn't match, and they have to continue to adjust the data from the models. This has been happening so many times. They cook the books on the numbers. So how can we trust the data from the climate change models if they continue to change it? This goes directly against the scientific method. And I find it interesting that anyone who questions the fact that climate is being changed by mankind, like Obama said, Obama was going to lower the levels of the sea. This is what he promised us. Anybody who questions this kind of rhetoric or it questions their scientific method is suddenly a science denier, when they are the ones who are going against the scientific method. And it's also untrue what climate alarmists are saying. There are, in fact, a large number of very serious and knowledgeable scientists who thoroughly disagree with the UN's notion that climate change is a global catastrophe in the making. So what do you think about all the rhetoric behind it? About especially even Al Gore's movie, An Inconvenient Truth movie, I believe is what it was. that was filled with inconsistencies and lies and things that were not bared out in reality. We were told then that there would be no more snow on Earth now, yet we know that to be not true.
Oh, agreed, and that's how I feel about all Michael Moore's movies as well. My point when I brought up Al Gore is mainly that you can accomplish more by speaking to people and trying to make a case to them to change their behavior than trying to impose a certain behavior regime on them. And then as far as the models and stuff like that, this is the same thing we see in economics with econometrics, where basically a lot of Keynesian economists, what they do is they find the theory that sort of justifies what the recommendation they want to make, and then basically they say if the historical data doesn't match or if their model doesn't perfectly predict the historical data, they just have to keep trying to weight the different variables differently until it does. So basically what happens, you end up creating a model that just justifies what you were trying to say to begin with, instead of trying to figure out truly why something is happening. And it's the same thing that's happening in climate, where basically they just tweak the models and reweight the variables first, so then they can continue making the same claim instead of really sort of rethinking the underlying theory in the first place. So things like economics and the environment to me are so complex, which is why government should never get near them.
Man, you just nailed it. I love the correlation you made with Keynesian economics. Essentially, and by the way, for those of you out there who aren't aware of what Keynesian economics is, it's basically Marxism's central planning of the economy. This is the elites thinking that they can dictate how the free market will work better than the free market, and they never are able to accomplish it as effective as a free market would. They're never able to central plan the way that a free market would without force used against people. And it's because, and this is the argument for free markets, there are too many variables. Just like with climate change, there are too many variables to keep track of to fully understand. You could think you have a working model, you may think you have all the variables at play, but you'll never know what will actually happen. And the best way to manage an economy is to not manage it at all and let the people choose what products they're going to buy, what they're going to invest in, and just to stay out of their way and not stifle them from innovating. Because again, you were talking about things in the climate change models that they couldn't predict, like trees growing more and sucking up more CO2. They couldn't predict that this would happen. Well, we also can't predict what would happen in the economy, because we're not in the minds of every single person, and people are going to do what is within their own self-interest. So the best course of action is just to get out of their way and let them do what's best for them.
Totally agree. 100%.
All right. So we're going to cut to a commercial break. Would you mind sticking around? I'm really having a good time talking to you, man.
Sure, no problem.
All right. So we're going to cut to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to be having more conversations with Alex Merced. He's a U.S. Senate candidate for New York. He's a Libertarian, and I'm really excited to continue talking to him. You guys don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Have you visited the On the Move with Mack Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bare Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On the Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support. Are you an activist who needs affordable flyers or brochures for passing out literature? Or a political candidate who's looking for business cards, logo designs, yard signs, or vehicle decals? Email me, Latasha Worley, for all your graphic design needs at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com. And don't forget to mention On the Move to get a 10% discount on all graphic design services.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mack Worley III.
And we're back. And we are joined by Alex Merced. He's a U.S. Senate Libertarian candidate out of New York. I'm really excited to talk to him. Alex, are you still on the line?
Yeah, I'm still right here.
All right, great. So I want to move to the election, the national election, and some of the aftermath that we've seen. Me being a libertarian myself in philosophy, I try to apply everything, including my government, into the theory of the non-aggression principle. That's how I live my life. And I think that if I don't have a right to hurt other people or to take their things, I also don't have a right to hire somebody or elect somebody to hurt other people and take their things. That's the way I look at life and government. And, you know, I feel like I am in a minority here in regards to applying this philosophy across the board. But I find myself in this interesting position that I can connect and have interesting conversation with leftists. I can have interesting conversations with those on the right, and I can also talk with libertarians. I don't feel like I'm excluded from talking from anyone. I wonder if I'm not alone in this. How do you feel? Are you feeling a lot of disenfranchised people out there, and you're able to communicate with them, or do you feel like there's a wall up right now?
No, I feel the exact same way, where basically there's always something in common with either way. And I do feel like the role of libertarian, so the libertarian perspective is not a majority perspective. It's a hard, because you have to really, it takes a lot of introspection. It takes a lot of it's such a basic idea, it's such a simple idea that that if people are free, things will generally work out better, which makes perfect sense as you explore the idea. But people are so conditioned to be skeptical of freedom, especially at such an early age, when you watch the news and you see all the bad things and the bad choices that sometimes people make, that people become very skeptical at a very young age, whether it's on the social side of things or on the economic side of things. But it does take a long time. But at the end of the day, us libertarians, I feel, are sort of a night watchman, in the sense that we're always there to be the one to explain why power shouldn't be centralized, why people should be free, regardless of where everybody else is at. But right now, the left is primed for libertarianism. I mean, I was originally on the left when I was younger, up until 2008 with Ron Paul. Now, what kind of got me down that path was concerns over executive overreach from George W. Bush, and that idea got me more concerned about sort of limiting that power. And then when Ron Paul came along and applied that sort of thinking across the board, it just made sense. But now you're going to have all these people on the left, and I'm thinking more like the young millennials and who maybe just voted for the first time, who are now going to be concerned about executive overreach with Donald Trump. Whether that happens or not, they're concerned about it. And right now they're primed to hearing that libertarian message about, limiting government power and abuses of power, etc. So right now is a great time to sort of essentially harvest a lot of potentially new libertarians. The last 8 years were a great 8 years for harvesting libertarians on the right side of things. I think the next 8 years will be a great time for getting people who are primed for libertarianism on the left.
So, do you believe that right now we are overtaxed? Do you think that Americans are paying too much money in taxes to the federal government or to the state and local governments?
Yeah, I think we were overtaxed pretty much from day one. But definitely, I mean, I even thought the 7% at the top tax rate in 1914 was too high, and 90% was way too high. But I mean, it's not only just how high the taxes are. I mean, people can take a hit. But when you make it hard, for example, if I go to a restaurant that's expensive, okay, and on a nice day, and I sit there and I buy dinner, yeah, I'm not thrilled about having to pay a huge check, but it'll make it hard for me to pay. I don't have to sit there and I don't get my check for dinner. I have to sit there and subtract line A from line C and then submit Schedule B in order to pay my check at the restaurant. So you throw in all this complexity on top of it, I think that's a lot more dangerous because people get scared when things become too difficult to do, so they want to keep it simpler for themselves, so they keep their financial life simpler. They don't invest in securities. They don't start a business because of all these extra effort, the extra concern over compliance with the tax and regulatory code. So that concerns me even more. But yes, taxes are too high and they can always be lower.
So according to Gallup, I'm looking at a poll right now. This is Gallup.com. 57% of Americans say that they pay too much in federal income taxes, and you know I do think that you're right. When it's more complex, it discourages people from first of all trying to understand it, but also when we try to tax something, when we tax something, period, we actually disincentivize people to engage in that activity. So in regards to the income tax, it doesn't really make sense to tax that because you're taxing the productivity of Americans. And when you tax something, you get less of it. So we'll have less production or less productivity in America. 57% say that they're already paying too much. And I found it interesting here. Another poll that's on Gallup is that, by the way, the 57% saying they pay too much in taxes, that is the highest percentage since the 2001 tax cut. So that's the highest that Americans have felt that they've been overtaxed in 15 years.
I'm surprised it's not higher.
Yeah. Well, I am too. But here's an interesting correlation here that I'm just noticing. This is another Gallup poll. Americans' desire for third party persists this election year. In 2016, 57% of people believe that a third major political party is needed, as opposed to in 2012, it was down to 46%. So within a 4-year rise, we've seen a 11-point rise in interest in third parties. And it's interesting that I'm just noticing this. This correlates here to the Americans who say they're overtaxed, 57% as well. So both 57% believe that they're overtaxed and 57% believe that a third party is needed in this electoral system. What do you believe about the two-party system? Is it headed for a crash? Are we eventually going to get to the point where we're not satisfied with just two choices and we actually will start to look at the rest of the other tickets and the other parties and get them on the debate stage?
I think it's starting to break. I think it's going to take a little bit longer. I would imagine at least a couple more election cycles, presidential election cycles, before we see what a lot of people were hoping to see this election cycle. But I think this election cycle really at least opened up the awareness of the Libertarian Party, where I think we will have some decent local wins over the next 4 years. I think we'll start putting some more city council people on city councils, maybe even a congressman or two over the next 4 years. So I do think we broadened our base enough to start there. Now, the thing is that one thing I learned from being a U.S. Senate candidate is that any campaign is only as strong as its down ballot campaign. So basically my U.S. Senate campaign was only as strong as the number of congressional candidates we had and local candidates we had, which unfortunately in New York, because the Republicans and the Democrats have systematically made it so difficult to be on the ballot, and even when we got on the ballot, they made sure they got us removed from the ballot where they could. I was really the only Libertarian on the ballot, so that made it a lot harder. But in the same thing, if you're a presidential candidate, your candidacy is only as strong as the U.S. Senate candidates in each state that you have. And that's what helped Trump out a lot, because Trump had no get-out-the-vote effort. The get-out-the-vote operation was the operation of the different Republican U.S. Senate candidates across the country that got out the vote over there in Ohio. When you think of Portman in Ohio, he was the one who got out the vote for Trump. And so we need to build that sort of down-ballot infrastructure. But I think this year helped us move a lot in that direction by bringing in a lot of fresh blood, a lot of credibility. There was definitely some things that I wish could have happened a little bit differently, but still we made leaps and bounds this year. And now we're not going to get sort of a toss-ups or softballs like this year.
Yeah.
So going forward, the people over here, including myself and the Libertarian Party, we really have to do the work of getting involved in the community, going volunteering at local causes, and building those relationships within the community to win those local races. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people don't vote purely on most people don't vote purely on ideology, especially in local races. They're voting for the people who they know and like. As you get to like U.S. Senate and presidential races, then it becomes a little bit more about the ideology of the brand of your party. But those local races, those city council races, it becomes a lot less of a party and a lot more about you. And do I see you in the local school board meetings? Do I see you at the local grocery store? Have you ever talked to me before? Being a member of the community. But it's all those community winners that help build that, let's say, approachability of the Libertarian brand. Right now, the Libertarian brand, a lot of people, they look at the Libertarians, they may agree with them on a lot of things, but their impression is that we just show up when there's an election to tell them about how wrong everything is, but it's between elections, they never see us, they don't see us at their softball games, they don't see us as a community face, other than maybe holding up like protest signs at the local protest for a tax here and there, instead of really, really being part of the community, like maybe doing charitable work within the community, helping do fundraisers for community events and stuff like that, where we put that sort of voluntary solution into practice in the community, but as a party, not just as individuals. Many individuals in the party do that, but we should start doing chapters, doing trips and stuff like that to really build sort of those community relationships.
So, in regards to the aftermath of this election, do you think that these, I'm going to call them riots because that's what I believe that they are, the riots that are taking place in major cities across the country, the anti-Donald Trump riots where people are destroying public and private property. Apparently there's a big anarchist group out there in Portland, Oregon. That's my old stomping grounds, by the way. But these guys out there, it's the May Day crew. I don't know if you're familiar with the May Day protests. You live in New York, so I would imagine you've seen a lot of May Day protests up there. But these big cities, they have a lot of organized Marxists. It's the convergence of essentially socialists, Marxists, communists, anarchists, Black Panthers, the Black Lives Matter movement, the unions, illegal immigrants. All of these things kind of come together and coalesce around May Day. But the thing is, they've organized, and they have the Occupy Wall Street movement network and everything that they're using essentially through the same thing. So this is what I argue is bringing these people out. And my question to you is first of all, what are your thoughts on these protests / riots? And do you support them, or are you condemning what they're doing, or is there some middle ground?
No, I condemn the protests. Generally because I think the protests are overblown. Like, I'm not super concerned about a Trump presidency. I mean, there actually may be one or two good things that Trump does over his 4 years, but also the things that are the most sort of dangerous, the ideas that I'm most scared of, those are the ideas that have the least power to do. And if anything, the fact that Trump is president is actually probably bringing more people's attention to the Constitution because of those concerns than I think ever. So, I mean, he's done more in the last week of being elected president for people to actually start reading the Constitution, being concerned about balance of powers and checks and balances than anything in a while. So I think that's a great thing. Yeah. But at the same time, there is the hypocrisy. And if you take a look at a lot of these protests, they are sort of younger folk. And sometimes I definitely feel like when you're younger, because I remember when I was younger, I mean, I'm not that old, I'm 31, but you have this energy when you have outrage, you have this energy that you really want to channel into things, and that's why it's always, there's a lot more, you get this kind of thing. And I mean, and also, when you take a look at if you talk about like the far left, like communist anarchists, I mean, they don't really have much respect for private property rights to begin with, so they're going to be more likely to sort of, cross that line. But at the end of the day, no, there's this, people have a right to protest, and I totally understand people's protesting, their frustration with the result of the election. But when you start damaging people's property, you've crossed the line and you've undercut your own message. Although oftentimes, it's not necessarily most of the people who are at these, let's say, riots most of them probably didn't want this to cross that line. There's people who definitely, I feel, actively look for these kind of events to cross that line because they know they can get away with it in these large demonstrations. Mm-hmm. So like, oh, okay, cool, there's a large demonstration going on here. This is a good opportunity for me to go break some windows and get a new TV. So I try not to take it too much out on the intention of the protest, Because oftentimes the people who sort of start it and get it going in that direction, it's usually a small group that kind of has the intention there of doing that, at least that's what I believe. But I don't think that, I never condone the destruction of property, nor would I ever excuse it.
So what do you think if during a Trump presidency, because I argue that this civil unrest is only going to get worse from here. This is my opinion. I think that as Donald Trump begins to take the presidency, it's going to accelerate. And, once he's actually in office, I think the things that we're seeing now are going to multiply. So my question to you is, if Donald Trump, his first day in office, there's massive riots in the United States, what should be his response? What would you do if you were Donald Trump in order to stop the destruction and the lawlessness that would be happening in our inner cities while respecting individuals' rights to protest?
I would have a discussion. I mean, that was one of the things. I had people from the right, the left, the far right, the far left who voted for me and were openly active supporters, even though I was a very far radical libertarian. And the reason was because I was accessible. I would do Facebook live streams. I would answer their questions. I would give them honest answers. I would hear their concerns and acknowledge their concerns, and try to, at least try to understand where they're coming from and not dismiss them out of hand. And that went a long way in getting people to at least agree to disagree with me and still be able to support me even if they disagreed with me, because they knew at least I was listening. So what I would do is I would at least make some sort of effort to show that I am listening even if I disagree, whether it's doing some live streams. And I mean, we know that Donald Trump isn't necessarily unable to use social media. So
yeah.
him making some effort to sort of at least do some olive branch listening and saying, okay, let me hear your concerns. We may not agree, but at least maybe we can find a way to live and work together. I think that will go a long way, because a lot of times people resort to demonstrations and whatnot if they feel like they aren't being heard. And a lot of people, I think, feel that Donald Trump doesn't listen. At least of those on the left, I think they don't think that Donald Trump is even predisposed to listening to them. So if Donald Trump were to at least show that that's not the case, I think that would go a long way in just squelching that from the get-go.
So if, let's say, he does do that and the riots still escalate, what should be his response? Would you condone or not support a calling forth of the National Guard to push back rioters who are destroying public and private property, or would you think that would be a step too far towards a police state?
Well, you got to do what you got to. I mean, if they're destroying property and it's becoming like violent and people's property and lives are in danger, then you have to take steps to get it under control. My concern is sometimes when you do try to get a riot under control, sometimes it makes it worse. So you're in a tough position at that point. To me, when something gets violent, I mean, you can use violence to control other violence, but it never ends it. The only way you can end it is through non-violent means, and to me, that's that whole listening thing. And if that doesn't fix it, I'd be shocked. And I mean, that's to me that's generally my perspective on most violent conflicts. Yeah, the violence can mitigate other violence, but the violence won't truly end until both parties feel like violence is no longer necessary. And usually people resort to violence when they feel like there isn't an alternative. So when you're listening, I think, gives people the message that there is an alternative.
So would you support or oppose, in a situation where there was rioting and violence, would you support or oppose the imposition of martial law, curfews, or the suspension of protests in order to stop these riots?
It depends how bad it gets. It would have to be really bad for me to think that was appropriate. I mean, it would have to be really, really bad, because that should really be the last-ditch effort. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to sort of use your local law enforcement, statewide law enforcement, and different other bodies to help try to manage that situation way before it gets to that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And you know, I don't know what's going to... By the way, I'm not saying that all these things are going to happen. I do think that the riots are going to increase and get even more violent and extreme.
Oh, yeah. Because it's truth that Donald Trump is finding out someone to do a lot of listening. So
yeah, and it's very doubtful. He'll be sitting there trying to reach out an olive branch to people who are rioting against him. And the big wild card that I just don't know what Trump is going to do. And I will personally not be supporting martial law, curfews, or suspension of protest rights, but I will support trying to keep the peace. You know, first of all, having a civil discourse, talking to people, and trying to hear them out. I feel like that's my biggest goal right now, is to understand what the left is really saying. And one of the things, by the way, that the left is really speaking out against right now, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is the Electoral College. They're upset that Donald Trump did not win the popular vote. By the way, I'm hearing some conflicting stories on alternative media that are saying that he may have won the popular vote. Right now, based on what I'm seeing on credible news sources and you know, the mainstream media, again, who knows who to trust, but what I'm seeing right now is Donald Trump did not win the popular vote, but yet he won the electoral vote. And I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on the Electoral College? Should we preserve it? Should we get rid of it?
I don't think we need to get rid of it. I don't think it would change much, because everyone's assuming, okay, the outcome of the election would be different if we went by the popular vote. But if we went by the popular vote, the way the two candidates would have campaigned would have been different as well. So who knows what would have been the result if they campaigned differently. Also, the Electoral College, the only reason why a difference between the Electoral College, how many Electoral College votes go to each state, is based on population. The idea is to make sure that each state has their proportional weighting, whether the people of that state decide to turn out for the election or not. Okay, so basically, when you win the popular vote but you lose the electoral vote, it's because of turnout issues, not because the Electoral College is weighted against the population. It isn't. Iowa has Electoral College votes that are in line with its population, but maybe a smaller portion of its population. So basically, if everybody turned out and voted, like literally you had 100% eligible voters turn out and vote, there would be no difference between the Electoral College outcome and the popular vote.
Because
the difference here is
they're based on percentage of the population. So if everybody in the population of every state turned out, you'd end up getting the same result, correct?
Correct. So so basically this is a turnout issue. People should be more concerned about getting people to the polls than the Electoral College. The Electoral College just at least makes sure that just because maybe half of the population of Iowa doesn't want to show up to the polls, that you still care about Iowa.
Yeah, well,
there are issues.
And on top of that, you know, it's the Electoral College. First of all, it's a states issue. This is a states' right issue because you know, if you're living in Wyoming, for example, if it's just based upon the popular vote, the vote is going to be decided in places you know, with the most population. So places like California, Texas, New York, those places are going to have. They're basically going to be the ones deciding who gets elected every year because of the popular vote. If you're in Wyoming, you won't have as much of a voice. And moreover, if you're talking about the historical reasons for the popular vote, is that the founders, they didn't trust democracy. They didn't, and that's why we're not a democracy. We're a republic. The founders did not trust mob rule. Benjamin Franklin himself said, democracy is two wolves and a lamb voting for what's for dinner, and liberty is a well-armed lamb. So this is the difference in where many people on the left stand. They think that we are a democracy. They believe in and agree with democracy, whereas I don't. I don't like the idea that just because there's a majority against you, people can violate your rights. I believe in a constitutional republic, and I support the ideas behind it. And you know, our founders, they were concerned about the man on a white horse rolling in, coming in, and trying to say that he was going to fix all of our problems, going to be the answer to every issue that we face. And people were going to give him power, and they wanted to put a buffer between people, the popular vote, and the most powerful office that we have in the United States, which is the presidency. So this is why we have an electoral college, and I believe in the electoral college. I agree with it, and I oppose any kind of efforts to remove it. One thing I find particularly interesting, I have just a few minutes here left with you, Alex, is the secession movements that are now going on in California and in Oregon. And I would just like to hear what you think. Do you give this any credibility? Do you think this is a good or bad idea? The secession movements from the United States government from California and Oregon.
Oh, I love it. Basically, it's because for years, to me, at the end of the day, there's a lot of mechanisms when it comes to trying to rein in or checks and balances on federal power. And I think ideas like nullification, secession, are important parts of that. Basic ideas is first you try to use the Constitution. You try to use the constitutional, the three branches of government. You try to use your separation of powers to try to keep the balance of power. But when that doesn't work, that's when you have the ability. That's when states have the authority to be able to nullify state laws that may cross those constitutional boundaries. And then if they still have trouble doing that, we are a union of willing states. States should have, like any union, anything that you join, you should have the ability to withdraw from it. So, I mean, now, and I find it so ironic that the left, who's shamed people for expressing these ideas for so many years, are now suddenly embracing it, even though they technically went with it when they've ignored federal drug laws, and now they're embracing secession in California, which is ironic, because if California did secede, then basically a Democrat would never be able to win the presidency again. Basically, what would happen is that the Libertarians would become the left of the country, which that's not such a bad thing. That might make it easier for Libertarians to make a difference.
Yeah.
So let California go.
Yeah. And you know, I've said that I think that they'd be at war with us within a week for our resources if we did that. So, you know, I don't think that because first of all, most of California is uninhabitable if it wasn't for water from elsewhere being piped in. So, if they didn't have that those resources, they would need those resources. I don't think, even though California is a huge economy, I think it has like the fifth or sixth largest GDP in the world. I still don't think this is a good idea. I don't think it's a serious idea. But even if it is, and it does somehow succeed, all they've done is guaranteed a one-party system here, I believe, in America. The Republicans would just be in power continually. But Alex, we're out of time. By the way, I really enjoyed talking to you. I can't believe we haven't talked before. I'm so happy I met you. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Oh, it's been fun.
Do you have a website, social media, and things like that people can go to get a hold of you and find more information about you?
There is a lot. So bottom line, you can find everything at alexmerced.com. Please like my Facebook page, facebook.com/alexmercedlp. I have a website for people who want to learn about libertarianism, libertarian101.com. Tell your friends. And I have a website for learning economics, learneconomicsnow.com. And I also have a podcast, the Alex Mercedcast, where I talk about all sorts of stuff. In this most recent episode, I talked about political correctness as an informal intellectual property institution. And next week, I'll be talking about the Civil Rights Act next Friday. So those are some nice hot-button issues that you guys can listen to on the podcast. And, and I do a lot of live streaming. So if you like all my stuff, you'll have plenty of opportunity to ask me all the questions you want.
Outstanding. I'm going to go check out all your stuff. I didn't know all the stuff that you were into, Alex. This is exciting, man. I'm glad. By the way, first of all, would you be willing to come back on the show at some point in the future?
Of course.
I really like talking. I love connecting with other libertarians. And by the way, also, if you ever need a guest, hit me up, man. I'd be happy to join.
Will do.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Alex. You take care.
Sure, no problem. Thank you very much.
All righty. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Alex Merced. Check him out. Check out his podcast. He's doing awesome stuff, and I really enjoyed that conversation. So we'll be right back after this break. When we come back, we should be joined with Dan Sandini of the Daylight Disinfectant. That's daylightdisinfectant.com. And I'm really looking forward to talking with him. He's going to rub it in my face that Donald Trump won, and I'm gonna pretend to not hear him. No, I'm just kidding. But we'll be right back. You guys don't want to go anywhere.
Have you visited the On the Move with Mack Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bare Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On the Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support. Are you an activist who needs affordable flyers or brochures for passing out literature? Or a political candidate who's looking for business cards, logo designs, yard signs, or vehicle decals? Email me, Latasha Worley, for all your graphic design needs at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com. And don't forget to mention On the Move to get a 10% discount on all graphic design services.
This is Dan Sandini of DaylightDisinfectant.com, citizen journalist, friend of the late Andrew Breitbart, and cohort of James O'Keefe. I listen to On the Move with Mack Worley because the only time he's wrong is when he disagrees with me.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Welcome to On the Move.
We're in the third hour of the program. This is our overdrive hour. I certainly appreciate you sticking with us through the break and through the program. We've had an action-packed show today. I've really loved it. And, we're not done. We still got more on the agenda. Dan Sandini is going to be calling in any minute, and I'm really looking forward to talking to him. We had Mark Delphine. He's a left-leaning libertarian on the program with us for the first hour. The second hour, we had Alex Merced. He's a libertarian running for the U.S. Senate, or ran for the U.S. Senate this election in New York. And we had a really interesting conversation. And I believe that this is Dan Sandini giving us a call. Hey, caller, what's your name, where are you calling from? Caller, I don't know. Hold on a second. Let me see if it's muted. One more time. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hello?
Hey.
Is this Mac?
Yeah. Hey, is this Dan?
Hey, it's Dan Sandini calling in. I'm sorry I'm so late calling in today, Mac.
It's all right, man. Live radio. I'm just happy that you called because, by the way, you're the third guest on the show, and things never work out when I have this many guests. Usually one will not call in, or all of them will not call in. So by the way, thank you just for calling in first and foremost.
Well, thank you for having me on.
Before we get started, I want to plug all of your stuff here. So everybody check them out at DaylightDisinfectant.com. Go to YouTube.com/DaylightDisinfectant. Get them on Twitter at DaylightDis. And message him. Let him know what you think. If you agree or disagree with him while we're talking, hit him up. Same here at On the Move Show. We'll read your stuff live on the air. I want to start with you, Dan. I want to give you a moment to rub it in. So go ahead and do it. Get it out of your system. Go ahead and rub it in, please. I'll wait.
Well, I'm not one to rub it in much, but I do think that there's a certain amount of glee to be had, not on behalf of Trump supporters over other members of, say, the conservative movement or libertarians or anything like that, but I do think there is something to be said of this being a victory of the people over the mainstream media and their attempts to try and basically turn news into Pravda. Because what you've been watching, and there are videos that are out there, I'll post one to your wall afterwards, which basically show that CNN has become propaganda. And you have the New York Times today rededicating itself to being a truthful source of news about the candidates or about the political process going forward. Why do they need to rededicate themselves? With what the heck happened over the course of the election? I mean, it's clear to everyone that they were one-sided and biased, and they're trying to, they're looking at their circulation numbers. And this is the New York Times is the newspaper of record. It's not the newspaper of record of New York, which, we have the Oregonian, which is the newspaper of record for Oregon, right? But the New York Times is the newspaper of record for the United States of America, and they are rededicating themselves to truth, basically. And so I view this as a victory.
I'll take a victory lap in terms of citizen journalism, okay? Guerrilla journalism as exemplified by James O'Keefe, just basically, citizen journalism in terms of mom and pop and, you and me and even people from outside of the country taking stuff that surfaced inside of Julian Assange's emails, WikiLeaks emails, taking stuff that showed up inside of James O'Keefe's underground guerrilla videos, showing the Democrat Party for what it is in terms of organizing violence at Trump events, and just doing an end around the mainstream media. And so like I said, I'll take a victory lap in terms of citizen journalism over mainstream media. And so, yeah, that's how I see it anyway.
So look, I appreciate you not rubbing it in, but I just want to show you this is the proper way to rub it in. This is how you do your victory lap. You do something along these lines.
I told you so.
I was really, honestly, it's kind of funny, Mac, because I jinx things. But I came into that evening that really I had been watching the polls just like everybody else, and I had never been much of a poll watcher, but I got into the Real Clear Politics polls, and I had been looking at the spread between Hillary and Donald Trump, and she had stopped the free fall. The Friday before that, or a week before the Friday before the election, Comey had done his dump where they had found stuff on Carlos Danger's laptop, Anthony Weiner's, who's Huma Abedin's soon-to-be ex-husband.
Carlos Danger, that's great.
Carlos Danger, you can't make this stuff up, right? That's so creepy and funny. In any case, but he had, that Friday he had done the dump on that, and she went in a free fall. He closed the gap. He had a huge gap before then, like about 6-7 points or something like that. And so Real Clear Politics keeps an average of the polls across the United States, like a rolling average. I'm not sure how far back they go. And that went free fall into a couple of points and then down to 1 point, and then it bounced. Somewhere around Thursday, he closed as much as he could, and then they went parallel. And I was just watching it. I'm like, he's not going to win the popular vote. I don't think he can win the, and you don't know what to believe after a while in terms of polling. And all my friends tell me, polling data is wrong, and so I just stopped reporting it on my timeline. I was like, but I felt I had been poll watching all day. I was doing observations at a state outside of Oregon and questioning people, and saw quite a few irregularities. I didn't expect to see anything, but I won't call it outright voter fraud. But, if you're interested in hearing any of those things, I saw a bunch of examples of things which really caused me to think, hey, we may have mail-in ballots in Oregon, and those may be prone to fraud, but the regular polling stuff is definitely not absolved there. But so anyway, I came into that evening. I don't know what you did, Mac, and I should have listened to the rest of your show, but honestly, today's been kind of crazy. But I had thought he was going to lose for sure. And I just started watching, and I was like, I have a plan in my head for what I'm going to do if he loses. Go to ground, keep doing the things we've been doing in terms of guerrilla journalism, citizen journalism, exposing the left, and come up with another candidate in 4 years. Maybe it's Ted Cruz this time or whoever. I don't know.
Lion
obviously
Ted? You would support Lion Ted Cruz? What? What?
Well, look, none of us are perfect people. None of us are perfect people.
I'm just. By the way, I like Ted. I got my beef with every politician out there. There's at least something I disagree with, and I do think that, by the way, that was a gross mischaracterization of Ted Cruz. I'm going to think the guy's pretty honest, but I'm just saying because I remember you.
Well, they all lie.
Ted.
They all lie. They all lie. If you look at PolitiFacts, Trump has. It's unbelievable the amount of falsehoods that PolitiFacts has. I don't know whether to trust PolitiFacts or not. I have to look at a few of their examples. But the left, who has been organizing, Cameron Whitten, who's been organizing a lot of these protests in downtown Portland. He says he's not organizing them. I know better. But Cameron Whitten, who ran for mayor, has been rubbing my nose in PolitiFacts and Donald Trump and how he's the real liar. So you can't call Hillary a liar because Donald Trump's a real liar. Donald Trump may be a liar, but he's not a liar when it counts. Hillary Clinton is a liar in a criminal way, and there's a difference between those things. I mean, it's one thing to stretch the truth a little. It's another thing to lie about whether emails on your computer jeopardize, were classified and jeopardize the security in the United States. That's a whopper right there. It's a whopper that'll should land you in prison. It hasn't so far, but should land you in prison.
So let me ask you here, because this is all happening. A lot of this is happening in your backyard right now. In Portland, there are anti-Donald Trump riots that are happening, and Joe on our chat room, he wanted to say that the riots are stupid, and a lot of people are having other opinions. Pat on Facebook says arrest them, put them in FEMA pins, and that Obama had built for those protesters if Trump lost / do it. Then Kel on Facebook says at least they're going to keep doing this kind of civil unrest until the Soros money runs out. I was just curious, what are your thoughts? And do you believe that what's happening in Portland is the organization of the May Day groups that come out? These are, I argue, I'm seeing many of the same faces and many of the same signs and messages that I saw during May Day. Do you think these are the same May Day protesters that go out?
A short answer, yes. In terms of characterizing this from a Portland perspective, and I definitely, for your listeners who don't know me or what I do, and you do go look at my channel, you'll see that I have a sort of hands-on experience with these people. I think it was you that taught me once that, the political spectrum is like a donut, and at some point the far right wraps around to the far left, so that you get the communists that seem to have a lot in common, who are what? The biggest government you can imagine, right? I mean, takes away all, eventually, you lose everything. There's no personal property rights. I don't think so on a communist. So you get those guys mending up with the anarchists, So, and anarchists tend to be violent now, but both of those groups tend to be the people in the streets. And you and I have been downtown in May Day. We have some great photos of us down there.
Yeah.
But that's a same group of people. But in their I don't know all those people, and I've seen 2 sets of 9 of mugshots, and I didn't recognize the face. So, but it turns over quickly in Portland. Every 4 years you get a new batch. Wait, those students take more than 4 years to graduate, right?
Well,
don't they, Max? So probably every 8 years.
It depends on their school, but what I'm seeing and what I think is happening, it's the infrastructure, essentially the organization from the Occupy Wall Street and the May Day protests, all built together a network that are organizing these movements to come out, and then obviously you're going to have a lot of the useful idiots that fill this up who don't necessarily know what they're voting for, but they come out to support it. Don't necessarily know what these movements are about, and that they are about communism and the complete destruction of the capitalist system, and yet they are just anti-Donald Trump. Again, this is why I want to be clear. I kept reminding people to be careful and to steer clear of the anti-Donald Trump movement. I was never Trump myself, insofar as I wasn't going to vote for him in this election, but I wasn't going to align myself with these lefties who were also anti-Trump because I understand what they represent. And I'm saying be careful. Don't get caught up on either side. Don't go too far pro-Trump, because that's the alt-right. And you're talking about nationalism, neo-Nazism, the KKK, white supremacy, uber-nationalism. Those kind of things are stuff that I'm concerned about. I don't want to go too far over that way, and also not too far over to the left, because it will end up like this. I predicted this. I predicted civil unrest. We're seeing it now. And you know what? I'm not one to gloat either, but I did.
I told you so.
No, I'm just kidding.
It's so funny.
Look,
it's hilarious. It's so funny.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, I think this is good. That's a song, by the way. That's a country song. But
really?
Yeah, I went out and looked for it. But yeah, I expected more of this, and I expect even more when Trump takes office. So I am urging everyone, be careful about who you're standing around. Watch out who's to your left and to your right, because they may not have the same principles that you do. And I don't want to dime him out, but Mark Delphine, who was on at the first hour of the show, I saw a Facebook Live video of him out there at an anti-Donald Trump rally in Portland, and I'm sure that he doesn't believe a lot of the same things that these people are supporting and rallying for and destroying public and private property for. I'm sure he doesn't condone this, although we didn't have an opportunity to get to that on this episode. But again, these are my concerns.
Was Mark really down at one of those protests?
I saw a Facebook Live of him like giggling down the street, laughing like "ooh," yeah, and I heard like a bunch of "not my president."
He can be a little bit. He can be a little bit on the whack job side sometimes, and I know he didn't like him, but I don't think Mark would be the kind of guy that can condone violence. But I don't know, it'd be interesting to have him on the show.
No, I'm sure.
But,
I'm sure.
from what I know, Mark, he would.
I'm sure he didn't. He didn't condone it. He just went out. Look, I think Donald. I think that Mark, for example, and I hope he's listening. I don't want to talk about him behind his back or whatever. But I think Mark he just leans further to the left than I do as a libertarian. He's a left-leaning libertarian, so he's piped into the narrative coming from the mainstream media and the left that Donald Trump is a fascist and that he's going to throw people in concentration camps and start kicking in doors and deporting people. And I don't know what Donald Trump is going to do. I have my opinions and what I believe based upon his campaign, but where I stand right now, I am, first of all, I accept Donald Trump as a president of the United States. I understand that he won, and that is the way things work. Just like Barack Obama is my president as well. I don't support most of what he's said and done while he's been elected, and I don't support the policies that he's been pushing. But I want to make it, first of all, known that Donald Trump, I accept his legitimacy as the president of the United States. Second of all, I want to reach out to the lefties over there that are worried about Donald Trump, becoming a fascist, pushing more white supremacy, if any at all, and trying to impose force against people because of their religion, skin color, or religious bias, or their ethnicity, where they came from. These are things that I wouldn't support either. So I want to make it.
Well, you may know your live listenership is down this week because Donald Trump was on 60 Minutes Live here on the East Coast. I'm not sure whether that overlaps you at all. Probably doesn't. 7 o'clock here, and then I guess it runs at 7 on the West Coast,
I'm in Kentucky.
They rerun it.
We're on Eastern Standard Time out here, so I'm on Kentucky time.
Okay, so when you went live, and what time did you go on live here, Mac?
8 p.m. 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is every.
Yeah.
show.
Okay. So just before you came on, I watched Donald Trump. I watched Donald Trump on 60 Minutes with his first interview, and basically, I think it's Leslie Stahl is a reporter for CBS 60 Minutes, and she's pretty good. She asked him about this very question about the racists and anybody who might, approach somebody on the street to, give them a hard time because of their, skin color, the way they were dressed, anything like that. And he said, I'm really appalled to hear it. I'm sorry to hear it. And he said, I would tell him to stop it. And he looked right at the camera after that. And he said, as a matter of fact, stop it. He said, looked at the camera. So,
nice.
So I don't think you get much. Yeah, so I thought that was a good thing to do. In general, the interview went very well. For another thing, which might upset some of your listeners who may be evangelicals or whatever. I don't know. For me, I could care less about gay marriage one way or the other. To be quite honest with you, I know a lot of my gay friends are going to say, "Hey, okay," but Donald Trump said it's already been settled. It's a non-issue for him. He is not picking that issue up. So they're safe, and that's one of the things they've been saying. Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, I saw her on the news the other day talking about how people have a right to be worried because people who are married, gays who have been married, are worried about their marriages being voided. And that's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen under a Trump administration.
I just didn't hear Trump talking about that issue and seeming to care one way or another. I personally, but I want to make a note to my lefty friends that if Donald Trump starts violating the Constitution, increasing the police state, using force against people for not violating the rights of others, not hurting anyone, not taking their stuff. If he starts using force, using the police state against these people, I want to make it known that I'm going to stand beside them and oppose him. And I think that you as well. By the way, let me just.
Oh yeah, I would too. I want law. Go ahead. Yep.
Let me speak to the question I asked, Mark at First Hour. I asked him if he thought that Donald Trump supporters were racist, and he said probably the majority, but not all of them. This is what he said. I argue that probably a very small minority, maybe upwards of 10% at the most, are maybe the white supremacist KKK supporters, very racist people, maybe less. But I don't think that the vast majority of Donald Trump supporters feel that way, and I think you even kind of illustrate that. You said that you won't support Donald Trump if he starts doing that stuff, correct?
Of course. The things that I would support him doing is, he said that, if you have a bunch of bad actors out there, you need to bring law enforcement down on them. And if you're vandalizing personal property, you're destroying small, local, minority-owned businesses, and scratching things into windows on automobiles. On what do new cars cost now? $50,000, $70,000. They're destroying these cars in downtown Portland. Those people need to be arrested and they need to be held accountable. They won't be. I can guarantee you right now. That won't start happening until January 20th. But these protesters in Portland, for anybody who is watching those protests, let me open your eyes for you. Nothing is going to happen to those people. Nothing. Okay, it's catch and release in Portland, and the DAs will not press charges against those people. They may, but they'll get off the misdemeanor and fine. And they won't do any jail time for any of that. They won't have to make compensation to the people whose stuff they broke. It just doesn't happen. If they're on the left, if they're on the right, that's something different. And it's sort of similar to your circumstances up there in Vancouver and laughing at liberals too. There's two sets of rules, and once you figured that out, you understand the whole thing on what goes on in Portland. But I would be totally against Donald Trump rounding up anybody. Rounding up anybody. That's just terrible. I can see. I'm at a loss to explain on how he's going to enforce immigration policy. Okay, and how he gets people who are here illegally to leave. And I think that's going to come down to stuff we can have arguments about, which is registering people. To say, hey, in order to work, you really do need an ID card, and if you don't have an ID card, you're not going to get a job. And so you've got a bunch of people here who really can't get employment anymore. And, when he says sanctuary cities are going to go away, he's going to pass federal law. He's going to say, hey, you know what, you can't do that anymore. If you're going to take federal money for your highways, for your roads, for whatever, you're going to enforce U.S. immigration law. If you'd like to change those laws, you may go through Congress to do it, because that's the way the Constitution is set up. But you don't just say we're going to ignore these laws and do these laws. And that's not going to happen anymore in the United States. So if there are any illegal aliens that are out there listening, you better figure out how you're going to get yourself registered, or you're going to have to make plans to go back, because that's just the way it's going to work in the United States from now on.
So I find it to be fascinating right now what's happening with these protests / riots that are happening in Portland, when, first of all, they are destroying public and private property, and it's mostly the anarchists that you and I are very familiar with. We've had our run-ins with the anarchists down there in Portland. But I think it's fascinating that they're destroying their own communities in response to Donald Trump, when their community, first of all, the state of Oregon, 52% to 41% voted for Hillary Clinton in Oregon. So 52% in the whole state. But then when you talk about in Portland itself, the percentage is way, way higher. It's deep, deep blue. So they're destroying public and private property, first of all, in their own community. But second of all, inside their own community, it is heavily likely that the people whose property they're destroying voted for Hillary Clinton. I find this to be very interesting that they don't seem to understand they're destroying the property of the people on their own side. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it is. It's extremely ironic, because they are protesting against Donald Trump, who they say is going to destroy America, right? But what's really happening here is they are destroying America, and it's in very stark, realistic fashion, available to anybody inside the United States. And I see this as an opportunity for citizen journalism to stand back. because I honestly think that they are exposing themselves for what they are. And this will, and all these business owners that are seeing this happen will begin to question their own political leanings as a result of this. I mean, these are good things that can come out of something like that, but this is the case for the police to do their job. They won't. I mean, they'll catch them, they'll bring them in and charge them, but they won't go to jail. But yeah, it's incredibly ironical. I mean, what puts that in a person's head to go out and start breaking up personal property? And I don't understand it unless you're trying to bring the downfall of government, and I guess that's what the anarchists are doing. But is by taking a flag. What they do, Mac, is they use the flagpoles. That's how they're able to carry big weapons like that. Because a flagpole is something that can be an innocent object under most circumstances, right? They carry a black and red pennant with a diagonal. It's diagonally divided, and what they'll do is they'll roll the flag. Now it's a spear, essentially, a heavy metal spear, and with that they can easily penetrate glass. And so they'll attack these business windows. I've seen it over in Southeast Side.
They can easily crack somebody over the head, like, I don't know, maybe a citizen journalist named Dan Sandini who's covering an event in Portland.
I have been bopped, I will say, by a wooden. I guess it was a sign, a banner, okay, deliberately by Ibrahim Mubarak, who is one of these. He's one of the worst miscreants down there. And he's a homeless advocate, but he knows who I am, and he's hit me over the head with one of those. But yeah, if you got it over the head with one of those things, somebody was shot in Portland last night, weren't they? I don't know whether they got mixed up in a gang activity or what the hell.
So this is the rumor I heard. I haven't seen the news story on this, but I heard that there was a group of gang members that came down there with. Essentially, I think they had some kind of firearm. I don't know what it was. I heard a rumor that it was like a Mack 10 or something. I don't know, but that the gangs came down there to the protest, and you know as well as I do how overzealous these anarchists get, and they'll get right up in your face, and they don't care who you are. Apparently, one of them got shot in the leg, from what I heard. So I guess the gang members didn't subscribe to their version of anarchy. What do you think?
We're down for the cause.
Yeah,
it broke the wrong window.
Yeah.
You picked the wrong person. Eventually, that is going to happen. One of these anarchists is going to pick the wrong, the wrong truck or the wrong SUV, and it's either going to be somebody that's a foot soldier or a lieutenant in a cartel. And they're going to say, they're just going to pull their piece and shoot the guy, or it's going to be,
let's
Tea Party type.
Too, because these rioters down there, and these guys, whether or not they're involved in protests or not that are peaceful, many of these people are the same people that come down there year after year for May Day. Many of them are opportunistic and just waiting for an opportunity to cause mayhem any chance they get. So it's only a lot of these people are supercharged and violent and ready to go, and they're just looking for the right target and in an opportunity that they can get away with it. They have the whole group mentality where if they're in a group of people, they get a lot more bold, so they may be more willing to throw rocks or do something because they have a mask on and they don't think that they're likely to get grabbed and caught. They think they'll be able to get away. But looking at something that we've both seen recently here is our friend Mike, who was down in Portland, and these Black Lives Matter protesters started circling around him and putting their hands on him, and he felt afraid for his life, so he pulled his firearm in the defense of himself. The situation de-escalated. He gained a little more space from them. He put his firearm away immediately, but yet he was facing charges on that. By the way, I haven't heard much about that. What's going on with the status of his case? Are you familiar with the details of that? Or
I am, and I can. This is all public information, so it can easily be found out by going to the courthouse. So I don't think he'd have any problem with me telling you what's going on. But this is what's available publicly is that everything you said is true. And when the cops took him down, so again, as Mac was saying, he was being backed up by a group of these guys. You can see it in the video, and he got scared. And he pulled his gun. He's been assaulted by these people multiple times, like I have. Okay,
he had his arm broken.
He carries, he has his arm broken in 3 places. Very important part of this case, right, Mac? I mean, that sticks in your head, right? You're not going to break my arm again.
Absolutely.
Oh, right? You broke it once, you're not going to break it again.
Yeah, break me once, shame on you. Break it twice, shame on me.
Good point. That's exactly right. And so as he's backing up, he pulls out his Glock and they scatter pretty quick. It works perfectly. You know what I mean? So they do leave alone. He backs up, and he gets out of there. Right? But they do the takedown on him later. They arrest him and they charge him with a couple of misdemeanors. But then in the overnight, the DA came up with a bunch of felonies. And so they gave him the Bundy treatment, okay, right, which is, call him a racist, throw him in jail, and let him rot in there with high bail. He got bailed out, okay? So now Mike Strickland waits for his trial with multiple felonies over his head. And I believe there is a trial date. I think it's in February. But I do know they've had several hearings, and I think that there's probably going to be an offering of a plea bargain in here. I don't know anything to that effect, but that's usually, I think, is it 90%? I believe 90% of the cases are resolved without going to trial. I think so.
I don't know.
So most people plea out. Yeah, you're a rarity. You are a rarity, a very rare gem. And you are, and yours came out right. But I have no doubt. I know that most of these people who accused Mike have long criminal records of their own and problems of their own. And yes, I would say, and I know that on the nights before. Earlier that night when Mike had this problem, one of the main people who came at him was advocating violence. They have him on video doing that at an earlier part of the event, advocating that people, I don't remember the exact words, but he's an African American man, and he definitely, advocates violence at this event. You got to stop just talking about it, and you've got to start doing something about it type stuff, So all that factors in, and now this stuff, I haven't really thought too much about it, Mac, and I'll throw it back at you with that. It's like, do you think that this stuff, in the case of Mike Strickland, who was attacked by a violent mob, do you think that this will be in the minds of the jurors? Let's say if it went to the jurors, say, oh my God, this guy was defending himself against these mobs in downtown Portland. He's a peaceful guy with no criminal record. And he felt in danger. I don't blame the guy for pulling his gun. I think I would think that way if I was on a jury.
I would think that way, but I have lost a little bit of my faith in the jury system since the first jury that I saw convicted me. They unlawfully, wrongfully convicted me of violating the law, but I won an appeal. So I would say that, I don't know. It could go either way, but Portland is very, very left-leaning, and a lot of these people will pee their pants at the smell of gunpowder. So I don't know. But by the way, I checked the stats out on this. This is from BJA.gov. The source is the Bureau of Justice Statistics. This is from 2005. While there are no exact estimates of proportions of cases that are resolved through plea bargaining, scholars estimate that about 90 to 95% of both federal and state court cases are resolved through this process. And FYI, they did offer me a plea bargain. I just refused to take it. So
you're a brave man. You're a brave man. I don't think I wouldn't have the stones. But you both of you guys, I know both you guys pretty well now. You both are the kind of guys that I'm scared to death of a jail cell. I don't think I could be in there for an hour, never mind a day, never mind a week, month, a year. I mean, you do what you have to do in life, but I could not do what those Bundy guys did. I just have to stay clear of that kind of stuff because I'm just not made of that kind of stuff. I mean, on any given day, it's like baseball, right? On any given day, any given team, get lucky and beat the other guy, and then you're facing serious time. You can't undo. Once you get a guilty verdict, overturning it is like, that is just, hell. Yeah. I can't believe you did it. I couldn't believe you did it.
It took a year of appeal. Just the appeal process took a year. It took, 2 years for the actual criminal trial to fully go through, and then a year of appeal. I mean, it took a long time. No, let me just also caveat here, because I'm not like, I'm not, saying I don't care, I'll go to jail, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I was prepared to face that consequence if it happened. But mine was a little easier of a situation than Mike's, because mine wasn't a felony. It was a gross misdemeanor of displaying a weapon, which is what I beat, and then the misdemeanor charge of trespassing. But I knew that one wasn't going to stick because I had video, first of all, that I was on a public sidewalk. So they dropped that before we even got to the criminal trial. So it was just about displaying a weapon, and that was the biggest charge that I could have got would have been up to 1 year in prison. But it was my first offense, and it was very unlikely that I was going to do any real time, and I didn't. So when I was unlawfully or wrongfully convicted, I was sentenced to a year of non-reporting probation, and if I got in trouble again for anything at all, jaywalking, they could throw me in jail for a year plus whatever the charge for the next crime would have been. So essentially, they cooled my right to bear arms. I wasn't able to apply for a concealed carry permit out there, and I was fearful of even open carrying again, because if I open carry and get arrested unlawfully again, I could potentially go to jail for a year. So they literally they without doing it, they did limit my right to bear arms. So I still had the right in my house, but I was, I couldn't reasonably assert my Second Amendment rights outside of the home because of a fear of being unlawfully arrested again and then going to jail for a probation violation, which is ridiculous. So I don't know what's going to happen to Mike. I hope Mike stands strong, but I can understand if he takes a plea deal. He's facing felony charges, so that's a whole different ball game. He's talking about potential real jail time. If he did face jail time, I would consider him a political prisoner. But if it was me in that situation, I don't know what I would do. But if I happen to find myself in a jail cell, I'm going to use that time wisely. I'm going to hit up their library and read a lot of books. If I am ever a political prisoner,
if you don't get raped or killed. That's the problem with being in a prison. You just bad things happen to people in prison.
Yeah, you got to be Debbie Downer, man. Usually I'm a giant rain cloud. You got to bring. Hey, you could get raped and killed.
Hey, Mac, while we're on this topic, and I don't know how much time you have tonight, but I did want to mention one thing. So, I think what needs to happen, say you get a Rudy Giuliani as the head of the Department of Justice, okay? I really think what needs to be happening, people may say I'm crazy, but I have a sense these things need to happen, and I'm going to write to somebody at some point. I'm at least going to get out of my system that the Department of Justice needs to warn places like the local Vancouver Police Department and the local Portland cops, maybe not so much the Multnomah County Sheriffs possibly, but these are the cops that are around us down in that area, that they have observed that they are not pursuing crimes against the left, okay, when it is the right that is injured, okay? For example, me getting punched in the face with my camera. A district attorney, I'm obviously the victim, okay, of a felony assault with a weapon, my camera being the weapon. Punched into my face, okay, bloodied up to the hospital, and the DA on video from two different angles, and the DA refuses to press a charge because he cites prosecutorial discretion. I don't have to give you a reason, and so there's one case, right, where you're discriminating against me based upon my political beliefs and the fact I'm a white guy in a black church. You could even make that into a hate crime, right, if you wanted to. No problem doing that, right? The DA would win in a slam dunk. It wouldn't be an issue. Okay, so, but they are choosing to use the system against the political right, and they are not choosing to use it whenever the left gets in trouble. They're using it as a political weapon. And it couldn't be more clearer in Mike Strickland's case, where the DA came back with charges the next day and threw felonies at him. Okay, so I think what needs to be happening is they need to be put on notice by the DOJ. Okay, now that we have a Republican, and these are the kinds of things that can be done. Okay, not throwing people in FEMA camps. Okay, for somebody like Rudy Giuliani who writes them a letter. Okay, and then if they do it again, we have re-education based on the fact that it's illegal for them to discriminate and to use their selective enforcement and prosecutorial discretion to discriminate against a particular political belief. And when that happens, when someone gets punched in the face with a camera and they say, you damn Republican or whatever, that's a hate crime. Just like, if you're going to have hate crimes, that's a hate crime. That's kind of a side issue there, okay? But it's illegal to use it. Don't do it, okay? Don't use it as a weapon. And then when they do it, you have to have them do mandatory re-education for those police officers. and the district attorneys that are involved as well, okay? And if that doesn't work, the next time they get sued by the federal government, okay? And until that happens, you are going to continue to have a corrupt justice system that is being used by the political elites, by Kate Brown in our state, to have people murdered. In my opinion, the case of Lavoy Finicum, you know, I think that she could have just left that alone. I mean, they're no big deal. That's the biggest crime you've got facing you today, but instead they antagonized it, they pushed it to the limit, and we can get down to our motivations of why until they murdered one and threw the rest of them in jail, and then they could do whatever they want with those federal lands, okay? But my point is that sort of thing, it should be it is illegal, and the system is corrupt, and it needs to be corrected. And the Department of Justice can take action. They have done it in the case of these Black Lives Matter things. Okay, they can do it in the case of white Republicans being discriminated against by this system. And I think that Rudy Giuliani, I think that he would really look at that and say, hey, you know what? Let's go through some of these cases. Let's look at what happened to Mack Worley. Let's look at what happened to Dan Sandini. Let's look at what happened to Mike Strickland when someone broke his arm in 3 places and they threw the charges out on prosecutorial discretion. Yeah. They had it on video. I mean, it was just ridiculous. It gets to absurdity, but you can't complain to anybody because the mainstream media is not on your side. So anyway, I ask you what you think about that. Do you think a Trump Department of Justice could come to our aid in terms of draining the swamp locally?
Honestly, I have zero expectations right now of anything. For what I'm doing right now is, like I said, I'm wiping the slate clean. I'm gonna decide where I stand on what Donald Trump does based on what he does. So I'm gonna wait and see if he's trying to increase the size, scope, budget, deficit, and debt, and if he of the government. And if he is, then I'm going to oppose it. And if he's trying to reduce those things, then I'm going to support him. I don't know. I have very low expectations of a Donald Trump presidency, but I'm hopeful. I hope he does a good job. And I'm going to reserve judgment on that. I don't know, but we've got a couple minutes left in this segment, Dan, and I just want to get to you because this is the next attack here that the left is going. The next tactic is they're coming hard at the Electoral College. And from what I'm noticing now, Donald Trump did not receive the popular vote. And you said that this was a victory for the people. I'm just curious, how do you square that when he didn't receive the popular vote? And secondly,
I think it's still they're still counting. The votes are still coming in, believe it or not, in some of these states. They're closing that gap. It's not at all clear that Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote yet. Not clear yet. Not clear.
Okay.
But we have a Democratic republic. We have a we don't have a democracy. We have a Democratic republic. You remind me that a million times.
So what are your thoughts on the Electoral College?
I don't know. I'm pretty happy with it right now, obviously, I haven't been too happy with it in the past, but I think it seems to present a game which is not a slam dunk. Would the game be as interesting and as competitive if it was not based on the Electoral College? Well, I don't know. I honestly don't have too much of an opinion on it.
I wholeheartely support the Electoral College just simply because I prefer Republican forms of government. And in this case, we're electing representatives in the Electoral College to vote upon it on our behalf. So this is the essence of Republican governance. And personally, I'm not a big fan of democracy. I don't like mob rule. I don't think that simply because a majority of people voted for something that it should happen. And I like the idea that there's a buffer between the people and the highest, most powerful elected office that we have in this nation. So I am a big proponent of the Electoral College. And I don't want to see it go away. And I would be saying this very same thing had Hillary won under the same circumstances. So I just want to confirm with you, do you support the Electoral College, or would you support repealing it?
Yeah, I do. No, I wouldn't want to repeal it. I think I've entertained those people before who want to go back to the popular vote, and it's interesting to me. But I don't think it's the biggest fish we have to fry right now. We're almost at the stage of negative GDP here in the United States. If we're not at negative GDP, we've got a roaring stock market and negative GDP. And so your financial Armageddon may be right around the corner, by the way. Those two things do not add up. They do not add up. They do not add up. It's very scary what's going on. It looks, the stock market's forward-looking, but can it see past the downward slope of the current, decline in GDP, which is going to the negative? I don't know. So that would be my biggest thing. And the Electoral College would probably be about, number 10, maybe number 20, if it was on my list at all, right? It's falling way down the list.
At all.
We've got all kinds of immigration problems and, economic problems. We've got healthcare problems out the wazoo. This country, we have so many things that we have to solve. We've got corruption problems, huge corruption problems in Washington, D.C. We don't have time to discuss them all today, but, all those things come way before we'd have any problems with the Electoral College. I think states like Wyoming gets kind of screwed because what do they get, 3? Big deal.
Well,
is there anything lower than Wyoming?
It's based upon their population, and if it wasn't for, by the way, the Electoral College, it would be states, as I said in the second hour, it would be states like California, Texas, and New York that are essentially deciding the presidency for the rest of the country.
Oh, God help us all.
That's the only hope there would be Texas. But hey, Dan, we're up against the clock. I got to run. I'm going to wrap up.
Had a great time, Mac.
By the way, I really do appreciate you coming on. I had a great time as well. One more time, can you all your social media website, all that good stuff, so people can find you.
For God's sake, everyone, click on my website. It's daylightdisinfectant.com. Find me at facebook.com/daylightdisinfectant or facebook.com/Dan Sandini, where you can see the violent anarchists railing on my timeline in public, or you can give me a tweet at DaylightDis.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Dan. You take it easy, brother.
Thanks, Mac. You too. We'll talk to you online. See you later.
See you, bud. All right, folks, we're going to cut to our last commercial break of the day. When we come back, we're going to wrap up our featured topics. I want to talk about Islamophobia. Is it actually on the rise? I want to talk about these suicide hotlines experiencing an uptick in calls after the election, and a situation involving electioneering. We'll be right back after this break. You don't want to go anywhere.
Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign. Have you visited the On the Move with Mack Worley store? We've got amazing original design t-shirts, hoodies, cell phone cases, and coffee mugs for sale at OnTheMoveShow.com. Just click the shop link on our homepage. You won't want to miss out on the iHeart Open Carry and Bare Arms t-shirts for only $20 plus shipping. Again, just go to OnTheMoveShow.com and click the shop link on our homepage. Your purchases will help make the On the Move show bigger and better. We appreciate your support.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mack Worley III.
All right, gang, we're back. We're going to move very quickly through the last few minutes of the show. We're going to enter right into the next segment, which is the Mack Attack. This is where we talk about outrageous events in the news. So here we go.
It's time for the Mack Attack!
All right, we got to talk about what's happening in the aftermath of this election and some of the narratives that are coming from the left. So first and foremost, let's cut to the heart of what what these liberals, what these progressives, what the Democrats are feeling. This is a USAToday.com article written by Brittany Horn. This is dated October 18th, 2016, and presidential race, this is the headline, presidential race causes spike in crisis center calls. These are suicide hotlines. The article reads, crisis hotlines haven't fielded this many calls since the weeks just after 9/11. In June, about the time it became clear Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump would be their their party's presidential nominees, phone banks in Delaware and across America started ringing more often. Since then, Delaware hotlines have seen a 42% increase in hotline calls over the last 4 months compared with 2015. In September alone, calls increased from 8 to 23 in 1 year, with national hotlines reporting a similar spike. And the weekend following the release of Trump's comments about how he comes on to women, the National Sexual Assault Hotline saw a 33% increase in calls, according to the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. Our hotline staff started to see an increase in calls and doubled our staff for the weekend shift, said Brian Pinero Raines, that is the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, Vice President for Victim Services. There were times when there were 20 to 30 people in our call queue. The organization saw a 45% increase in web traffic as well. So the left is really becoming unhinged as a result of this election. So now let's move to the narrative we're hearing now, that there's an increase in Islamophobia, that it's on the rise, and that there's an increase in attacks against Muslim Americans or Muslims in the country. So this is an article dated 11 November 2016, written by Felkis Garcia. This is on the independent.co.uk. Muslim students at the New York University were chilled to find pro-Trump graffiti scrawled across the door of their prayer room, adding yet another case to the sharp rise of reported hate crimes in the wake of the presidential election. By the way, this scrawling pro-Trump message was Trump ! On the door. The apparent vandal defaced the door with a simple Trump ! At the NYU Muslim Student Association facility at the Tandon School of Engineering in downtown Brooklyn on the morning after Donald Trump's shocking win over Hillary Clinton, whose campaign headquarters was nearby. Mr. Trump ran his campaign on a number of promises that, if implemented, would have a dire impact on marginalized people such as undocumented immigrants. But Mr. Trump took special aim at Muslims, whom he said he would ban from entering the country altogether, breaking with one of the founding principles of the U.S., freedom of religion. Now, again, this is the article speaking, not me. The president-elect's message has appeared to resonate with his supporters amid a wave of hate crimes and threats that have surfaced in the past 48 hours. We awoke November 9th to a chilling wake-up call, the NYU Muslim Students Association wrote on its Facebook page, accompanied by a photo of the vandalism Wednesday morning. And as we open our eyes and we start to move and organize in the face of these new realities, we ask for your support. The group added that they were now aware that even a college campus in the middle of a progressive enclave like Brooklyn was not immune to bigotry that grips America. So, first of all, I just want to point out, this said Trump. It didn't say a racial slur, but let's continue reading the article. One student told the New York Daily News that even though the vandalism did not include specific threats against Muslims, the message was clear. It was really rough because it's a place to pray. It's a center of Muslim community. It's where all Muslim kids go to be with other kids. They do their homework there. Vice President of the Muslim Student Association, Sana Maya, age 21, said they didn't have to say "Go home, Muslims." They just needed to write Trump on the door, and they knew exactly what they were doing. The election of Mr. Trump has created an atmosphere in which Muslim students feel unsafe at high schools and universities nationwide. Campus police at San Diego University said one student reported an incident of strong-arm robbery. Two men allegedly attacked a woman who was a black Muslim dressed in Islamic dress, stealing her purse, backpack, and car. It is being investigated as a hate crime. So this is the best that they can come up with here of an instance, somebody robbing somebody, and they're investigating as a hate crime because she was dressed as a Muslim, even though they stole her purse, backpack, and car. Okay. We'll continue. Multiple Muslim women have also shared incidents on social media, because that's accurate, where assailants allegedly pulled off their hijabs. One woman said they were berated by a white woman at Walmart who told hijabs are not allowed here anymore after ripping it off her head. She then allegedly told the woman to hang herself with it. Walmart has not confirmed the authenticity of this report. So we're just going off social media. They continue. The Council on American Islamic Relations has called President-elect Trump to speak out against the stream of reported attacks and the general vitriolic bigotry that has emerged on his 18 months of the campaign trail. By the way, this is CARE. All right, the Council on American Islamic Relations. We'll explain this in a second. If President-elect Trump, this is a quote from them, from CARE, truly wishes to be the leader of all Americans, he must begin to unify the nation by repudiating the type of bigotry generated by his campaign for the White House, said this guy who I can't pronounce his name, and he's a national communication director of CARE. He continued to say, unless Mr. Trump speaks out forcefully against hate attacks by his supporters, they will all take his silence as a tacit endorsement of their actions. Now, I ask you folks, because we've been asking CARE to unilaterally condemn jihadism and Islamic extremism, yet they refuse to. Isn't it ironic that they say that not speaking out is a tacit endorsement of these actions? Interesting. If they want somebody to speak out against something, why are they not speaking out against something that they supposedly don't support either, which is Islamic extremism? If they're willing to come out and condemn Islamic extremism, then maybe Donald Trump would be. I don't know, but I just find it interesting, a little bit hypocritical, and I digress on this. That's my point. We don't have time to get into the electioneering issue that we were going to talk about. Some dude got arrested for having a Trump shirt, apparently. We'll talk about that next episode. But I certainly do appreciate your time, MacPack. You were the tip of the spear. Thank you so much for your continued support. Tuning in week after week, and if you've made it this far in the program, please, first of all, hit the like button at whatever platform you're listening to, be it Spreaker or YouTube. Please hit the like button and share this episode out with your friends and your family. You would be helping us so much, and I appreciate your continued support. And I want to shout out to Mark Delphine. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, I want to shout out to Alex Marced and Dan Sandini for joining us on the program today. You guys are awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And don't forget to check us out every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every Sunday on our website, OnTheMoveShow.com. You can listen to us on Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. Like us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. Follow us on Twitter at OnTheMoveShow. And subscribe to us on YouTube.com/OnTheMoveShow. And as always, know your rights, assert your rights, and get on the move.